Every town hides a story, but Havenridge hid something deeper, a secret buried beneath the lake that refused to stay silent. Some voices are trapped underwater, and some crimes are written so quietly only the storm remembers their names. You're listening to DarkPulse, midnight crime stories for sleep, where every night unfolds a true crime mystery, a psychological thriller, and the dark secrets hidden behind small-town smiles. Tell me, where are you watching from tonight, and how far would you go to uncover a truth the world tried to drown? Stay tuned, because tonight's story, Echoes Beneath the Lake, isn't just a crime mystery. It's a confession written by the water itself. Echoes Beneath the Lake. The bus hissed to a stop at the edge of Havenridge, the kind of small American town that looked peaceful until you listened too closely. Fog drifted low across the highway, wrapping itself around the sign that read, "Welcome to Havenridge, where the water never sleeps." Clara Wren stepped down, suitcase in hand, shoes crunching over gravel still wet from last night's storm. The first thing she heard was the lake. Not the usual slap of waves, but a slow, uneven sound like someone breathing beneath the surface. Mirrorvale Lake stretched out behind the pines, flat and silver, a sheet of steel under a pale morning sky. She hadn't seen it in 10 years, and she'd promised herself she never would again. But Emily's name still echoed in every voicemail, every unfinished dream, every hollow pause in her life. Missing, the news had said, presumed drowned. The wind carried the smell of iron and pine sap. Her throat tightened. Havenridge hadn't changed, not really. The same tilted church steeple, the same single gas station, the same diner that smelled of burnt coffee and secrets. She walked there first. Inside, the bell over the door gave a tired jingle. A handful of locals turned to look at her, then away again, the way people do when they recognize a face they wish they didn't. The radio whispered low country music through static. "Coffee?" asked the waitress, a girl with freckles and a name tag that read June. "Sure," Clara said. "Black." June poured, then studied her. "You're Emily's cousin, right?" "Yeah, how'd you know?" Small town. News travels faster than cars. Clara forced a thin smile. "Then maybe news can tell me what happened." June's gaze dropped to the counter. "They say she jumped, off the dock." "They say?" June's shoulders rose, then fell. "People talk. Sheriff says case closed, water took her." Clara leaned closer. "You believe that?" June's hand trembled slightly. "I believe the lake keeps what it wants." From the far booth, an old man coughed. He wore a red fishing cap and eyes like river stones. "Don't go poking around, miss," he muttered. "Some stories don't like being told." Clara met his stare. "And some need to be." The man grunted, stood, dropped bills on the table, and left without another word. Outside, his boots splashed through puddles that shimmered like mercury. Clara watched the door swing shut. Then she whispered to herself, "First day back, and already ghosts." When she stepped outside, fog pressed closer. The lake wasn't far, a 10-minute walk downhill. Every step felt heavier than the one before. By the shore, boats rocked gently, their ropes creaking against wooden posts. A single gull screamed overhead, then vanished into gray. The water looked calm, but Clara saw the slight inward pull, the subtle whirlpool near the dock. It reminded her of a mouth inhaling. She kneeled, fingertips grazing the surface. Cold. It bit her skin and left a sting. For a second she thought she heard something. Her name, maybe. But when she looked up, the world was empty again. Back at the inn, Mrs. Dalton, the owner, slid an old-fashioned brass key across the desk. "Room 7, she said. "End of the hall." "Thanks," Clara replied. Mrs. Dalton didn't move her hand. "Close your curtains at night. Light draws eyes from the water. Clara blinked. "Excuse me," but the woman had already turned away. The hallway smelled of lemon polish and dust. Her room was small, single bed, floral curtains, a desk, and an old mirror that had seen better decades. She set her recorder on the table and clicked it on. Day 1, back in Havenridge. Locals tense, sheriff avoiding questions, lake. Feels wrong. Rain began to tick against the glass. She unpacked the box she'd brought. Emily's files, her old camera, the small blue notebook that had arrived in the mail after Emily vanished. No return address. Just her cousin's initials burned into the leather. E.W. She opened it. Most pages were blank, water damaged. But halfway through, words had survived, scribbled in uneven ink. They watch at night. The water remembers. If I disappear, check the lake house. Clara's breath hitched. She spent the rest of the afternoon driving there. The road wound through thick forest, the kind where trees pressed so close they muffled the world. When the lake house finally appeared, peeling white paint, porch sagging, it felt like stepping into someone else's memory. The spare key still sat above the door frame, rusted but there. Inside, air smelled of mold and lavender soap. Dust lay on everything except the table. Someone had been here. On the table, a photograph face down. She turned it over. Emily standing by the dock, smiling. Behind her, blurred by distance, was a man in uniform. Footsteps creaked behind Clara. She spun, heart jumping. No one. Only the floor settling or pretending to. Then the back door moved, just an inch. Wind, maybe. Still. She felt eyes on her, heavy as rain clouds. "Emily," she said softly. The echo that came back wasn't her own. It was lower, male. Just a single word. "Leave." She froze. The wind slammed the door fully open, rain bursting in sideways. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She grabbed the photo and ran out to the car, gravel slipping under her shoes. Driving back, she didn't notice the figure that stepped out of the woods behind her, watching her taillights vanish into mist. At the inn, she locked the door, drew the curtains tight, and stared at the photo again. The man's face was hard to make out, but the outline of a badge was clear. "Sheriff," she whispered. Her phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. "Stop asking. She's gone. No signature, no sound but her own breath." Thunder rolled outside, followed by the long sigh of the lake against the shore. She whispered, "You're lying. She's not gone." From the hall came 3 slow knocks. Clara turned toward the door, heart racing. "Who is it?" Silence. She stepped closer. Another knock, softer, almost polite. She opened it a crack. Nothing, just the empty corridor and the smell of wet wood. Then she noticed it. Muddy footprints leading away from her door, fading toward the stairs, each print filled with a tiny pool of water. She shut the door fast, leaning her back against it. The lake was following her now. She whispered to the recorder again, voice shaking. "Something's wrong here. Everyone's afraid, and I think the water knows me." Lightning flashed, and for a heartbeat she saw her reflection in the mirror across the room. Except it wasn't quite hers. The mouth moved a fraction later, the eyes darker, deeper. When the thunder crashed, the reflection smiled. The smile in the mirror vanished when the thunder rolled away. Clara stared at herself until the grain of the old glass steadied and the room remembered its shape. Her pulse slowed, but not enough. She lowered the recorder to the desk and spoke softly. "I am not imagining things." The reflection moved first. It moved first. A hiss of rain threaded the windows. Somewhere a pipe clanged like a muffled bell. She closed her eyes, counted to 5, and opened them again. "Focus," she whispered. "Facts. Evidence. A crime mystery story needs facts. The photo lay where she'd left it. Emily on the dock, a man in uniform blurred behind her. Clara lifted the picture close to the desk lamp. In the right corner, almost cut off by the edge, a second detail. A signpost with a sun-faded warning. Deep water, do not dive. Under that, carved into the post, a small gouge shaped like a crooked letter R. She sat back. R for Ray, R for ruin, stop it. Names come later. Patterns first. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown message. This one had only 3 words. Curtains. Close them. She stood very still. Then slowly she turned to the window. The curtains were a finger width open, just enough space for a watcher on the hill or a watcher on the water. Clara shut them with a snap and locked the latch. Her voice felt steadier as she spoke into the recorder. Note, anonymous sender monitoring me. Threats, possibly local, possibly law enforcement. Maintain caution. Her stomach reminded her she hadn't eaten since the diner. She carried her coat downstairs, ready to brave the rain, and found Mrs. Dalton at the counter, counting receipts with a pencil stub. Kitchen's closed, Mrs. Dalton said without looking up. Storm night. Generators don't like company. I just need directions, Clara replied. To the north dock, the one with the old warning post. Now the old woman did look up. Her eyes were pale and glassy, the color of lake ice. You don't want to go there. I do. Mrs. Dalton's pencil hovered in the air. The north dock is where the echo carries best. You say a name and it comes back like someone else is wearing it. Clara waited. After a long quiet, the woman sighed. Follow Ridge Road. Turn when you see the 3 dead birches. Keep to the gravel. If you hear singing, you've gone too far. Singing? Mrs. Dalton folded the receipts. The reservoir gates sometimes whistle in the wind. Right, Clara said because there was nothing else to say. Thank you. She pushed out into the rain. Havenridge wore storms like a second skin. Streetlights threw halos into the mist, and the lake kept up its heavy, patient breathing. Her car's wipers beat a metronome. Ridge Road curved along a black fence, and ahead 3 white birches stood like bones against the dark. She turned onto gravel. The north dock appeared as a sliver at first, then a long finger pointing into the water. Her headlights skimmed the wet boards, catching on the corroded warning sign. Deep water, do not dive, and there it was. The gouged R in the post, exactly where the photo had promised. Clara cut the engine. The sound of rain swelled. On the roof, the hood, the lake. She stepped out, cold biting through her jeans, and walked toward the dock. Each plank creaked as she put her weight on it. She breathed through her nose, slow, careful, like a diver. Halfway down the dock, she crouched and traced the carved R with one fingertip. Why you? She whispered to the post. Who marked you? What did you watch? The lake did not answer, but the water leaned in, nearly imperceptible, as if it wanted to hear better. She stood, took 2 more steps, and stopped. There, beneath the dock line, nailed into the side rail, was a rusted metal tag no bigger than a coin. She scraped off algae with her sleeve, numbers 6 to 1959, a date. She swallowed. June 19th, 1959, the year scrawled behind the asylum photo. Lydia Harris. Lightning stitched the clouds. For the space of a blink, Clara saw another dock in the flash. Older, fuller, crowded with people whose faces were wrong. Too pale, too still. She closed her eyes until the afterimage faded. Breathe, she told herself. You're not here to be haunted. You're here to investigate. This is a psychological thriller, not a ghost story. Stay grounded. The lake made a sound like cloth tearing. Clara took a step back. A beam of light swung over the water. Headlights. A truck rolled onto the gravel and stopped just beyond her car. The driver's door opened and a figure stepped out, jacket hood up, shoulders squared. "Miss Wren?" The voice carried across the rain, male, rough. She didn't answer. "I'm Ray Donovan," he said. "Used to be a cop, not anymore." Ray. The letter carved in the wood. Her body wanted to retreat. Her curiosity wouldn't let it. "What do you want?" she called. "To keep you from doing something stupid," he replied, "like standing on the north dock after dark." Clara stayed where she was. "You watch all the docks?" "Just the ones that take people." He walked closer, boots thudding softly. 50-ish, weathered face. A limp he tried to hide. He stopped 2 boards away from her and looked past her into the lake. "Water doesn't forget," he said quietly. "It just changes shape." "Emily," Clara said. "You know what happened to her." Ray's eyes stayed on the lake. "I know this town. I know how it protects itself. By killing girls?" He flinched. "By keeping quiet?" "Same thing." He rubbed his jaw, ashamed of something she couldn't name. "I brought you something," he said finally, reaching into his coat and pulling out a narrow plastic bag. Inside lay a small brass key, tarnished green. "What's that?" Clara asked. "Storage locker key," he said. "My notes, my copies. I made them before the sheriff lost the originals." The word lost hung between them like a wet rope. "Why give this to me?" she asked. Ray's mouth twitched, almost a smile, almost a grimace. "Because you don't know how to stop. And because I owe somebody." "Oh, who?" He looked at her for the first time. "Your father," he said. "He saved my career once. I didn't repay him before the lake took him. I'm trying now." Clara felt the ground tilt. "You knew my father?" "Everyone knew your father." He asked the right questions. Ray's gaze shifted toward the hills. "They didn't like him for it." "Who's they?" Ray's jaw nodded. "You'll see." Lightning again, closer now, and with it a sound like a long moan, more metal than human. Ray jerked his head toward the far shore. "Gates," he said. "Reservoir. When the wind's right, they sound like singing." "Singing," Clara repeated, remembering Mrs. Dalton's warning. "What's in that storage locker?" Ray hesitated, then answered as if the words weighed more than they should. "Patterns, lists, names the town forgets on purpose. If you want a true crime mystery, start there. Unit C-17, Havenridge Depot. And if I want my cousin back," Ray's face softened, sadness or pity, "then you'll need more than names." A splash interrupted them. Not a fish, heavier. Both turned. Something had surfaced near the end of the dock, a shape the size of a backpack, then a little larger. Then it sank, leaving a slick ring of darkness behind. Ray swore under his breath. "We're done here." Clara didn't move. "What was that?" "Sometimes the lake returns pieces," he said. "Sometimes it doesn't. Tonight is not the night to find out which." He pressed the key into her hand, rough fingers cold. "Tomorrow, morning. Bring someone you trust." "I don't trust anyone here." "Then bring no one," he said and turned. "Ray," she said quickly. "The date tag, 1959, Lydia Harris. She's the sheriff's mother, isn't she?" He paused. Rain beat his shoulders. When he spoke, his voice had lost its roughness. It was careful now. "Go home, Miss Wren. Answer me." But he was already walking away, limp deeper now, hood sinking with water, his outline swallowed by fog. Clara stood alone on the dock, feeling the world tilt toward the lake's center as if everything wanted to slide in. She forced herself to walk back to the car, each step a negotiation with fear. The drive to the inn was shorter than she remembered. Time unspooled in strange loops around Mirrorvale. When she pulled into the lot, the lights flickered again, then steadied. Inside, the hallway stretched quiet and too long. She unlocked her door, shut it behind her, and pressed her forehead to the wood. Her breath fogged the paint. The recorder waited on the desk. She clicked it on. Findings. North Dock engraved R, likely Ray's mark. Hidden date tag 6/19/59 correlates with asylum records. Ex-cop contact provided key to storage unit C17. Sheriff linked by family Lydia Harris. Threat messages ongoing. This is a suspense thriller with multiple lines. Keep moving. She sank onto the bed and let the bed frame creak speak for both of them. The brass key lay in her palm, heavy as a coin from a shipwreck. She closed her fist and tried to imagine morning. The window ticked. She ignored it. Ticked again. Clara stood, crossed the room, and pulled the curtain a fraction aside. Something moved by the shore. A person? Too thin, too still. It stood where the grass met the water, more silhouette than body, and lifted an arm as if to wave. Her throat went dry. The figure didn't wave. It pointed, one long finger to the left. Clara followed the line. There, just beyond the inn's boathouse, a small light burned on the water. Not a boat lamp. A candle. It floated in a jar, drifting slowly toward the middle of the lake. She forgot to breathe. Another candle slid into view, then another. A trail of trembling lights moving in a curve as if marking a path across black glass. The figure on the shore lowered its hand. When Clara looked back, it was gone. She didn't think. She grabbed her coat and the key and left the room, the door catching once on the warped frame before giving way. The hallway smelled like wet rope. Downstairs, the lobby was empty. The front door groaned. Rain hit her face like bits of melted ice as she jogged toward the boathouse. The lake accepted the candles one by one, each flame shivering in the rain but refusing to die. They drifted along a line that began at the boathouse steps and bent toward the deeper water. "Emily?" Clara called before she could stop herself. "Emily, if this is you..." The night answered with a long hiss. Not wind, not pipes. A voice through teeth. She swallowed and took the steps down to the lower dock. Water licked the boards. The candles moved just out of reach, as if urging her forward, as if saying this way without words. She crouched, reached with 2 fingers, and felt glass. The jar bobbed, bumped her knuckles, and slipped free again, continuing down its invisible track. Clara stood, heart kicking, and realized what the pattern was. The candles weren't drifting randomly. They were following a path that curved around the old dredge markers, the ones they'd put out when the town deepened this part of the lake after the dam. She remembered the news clipping. Channel cut to 18 feet. New current warnings posted. The last candle in the line guttered, flared, and went out. The lake swallowed its smoke. Behind her, a floorboard on the boathouse steps creaked. Clara turned fast. No one. Only the scent of wet cedar and the sensation of having arrived somewhere a second too late. She backed up the steps, not taking her eyes off the water. On the far shore, lightning stitched the tree line. For an instant, the entire lake shone like a snapped photograph, grainy, overexposed, full of faces that weren't faces at all. She blinked, and the world was ordinary again. Dark, wet, breathing. "Okay," she whispered to the storm. "Okay, tomorrow I open the locker. Tomorrow I pull the first thread." The brass key felt colder now, like it had learned something from the rain. She slipped it into her pocket and turned toward the inn. At the door, she paused. A wet handprint glowed faintly on the glass. 5 long fingers splayed, then faded as if exhaled away. Clara went upstairs without looking again. In her room, she towed off her shoes, peeled the wet coat away, and sat in the dark with only the low hum of the heater for company. She tried to pray. But the words wavered, and in the spaces between them she heard the old woman's warning. "Close your curtains." Light travels across the lake. She did not sleep so much as fall sideways into a narrow ditch of hours. When she woke, it was to a pale suggestion of dawn and the sound of someone whispering her name from the other side of the door. Clara. Soft. Close. Wrong. She stood, crossed the room, and put her ear to the wood. "Who is it?" she asked. The whisper came again right at the seam of the threshold. "Clara." She unlatched the chain, turned the lock, and opened the door 2 inches. No one in the hall. Only the smell of wet pine and something else. Hospital soap, faint and bitter. Then she saw it. A slip of paper, folded small, tucked under the doormat like a pressed leaf. She picked it up and unfolded it with numb fingers. 3 words written in a thin, neat hand. "Find the room." Her stomach turned. On the back, in tiny print, another clue. C-17 has 2 keys. She looked down at the brass key in her palm and felt the section's final truth. The lock she was heading toward could be opened by someone else, too. The hall breathed once, as if the building itself had lungs. Clara shut the door softly, set the note on the desk, and stared into the mirror until her reflection remembered to follow her again. Outside, the lake exhaled, and Havenridge listened. Rain still fell the next morning, thin needles stitching the lake to the sky. Clara Wren stood at the motel window watching the water pulse under a sheet of mist. Sleep had been a rumor, every hour a dream that bit back. The note on her desk remained where she'd left it. Find the room. She wrote the words again in her notebook, then underlined them twice. C-17, she murmured. 2 keys, 1 for me, 1 for who? The recorder blinked red. Day 2, she said into it softly. Investigation expands. Sheriff connected to the old asylum. Ray Donovan delivered locker key. Objective, discover what Havenridge hides. She packed her camera, raincoat, and a thermos of diner coffee gone bitter overnight. Outside, the world smelled of wet bark and exhaust. A delivery truck passed, driver not waving. The silence of Havenridge had weight. It pressed against her ribs like water pressure. She turned onto Main Street. The buildings were neat, painted as if pretending to be wholesome. Laundry shop, church, post office. Behind every curtain, a shadow shifted. People saw her, but they didn't look. In a true crime story, she thought, guilt always started with averted eyes. The depot sat near the old rail yard, a row of corrugated units with numbers fading under rust. No cameras, just a chain-link fence and a guard booth with a thermos steaming inside. The guard, a thick man in a denim jacket, squinted at her as she stepped from the car. "Morning," she said, forcing casual. "Unit C-17. Got a key." He scratched his beard. "You Ray's friend?" Her pulse skipped. "Something like that." "Figures. He hasn't been by in months. Rent's paid, though." He gestured toward the far row. "3rd lane, end unit. Watch your step, floor floods easy." She nodded, thanks caught behind her teeth, and walked toward the numbered doors. Each one groaned under its own padlock. When she reached C-17, her hands trembled slightly. The brass key slid in clean, turned with a metallic sigh. The door rolled up halfway before sticking. Inside smelled of paper and mildew and time. Stacks of boxes leaned like tired soldiers. Dust spiraled through the narrow light from a cracked skylight. Clara clicked on her phone flashlight. Files, photographs, tapes. Old police reports marked Harris County Asylum. Closure incident 1959. She crouched, flipped through folders. Each held pictures of drowned patients retrieved after the dam burst. Water-bloated faces, wrists bound with hospital tags. The handwriting on the margins wasn't official. Ray's scrawl, "They did not drown alone." She swallowed hard. On the far wall, pinned beneath a rusted staple, hung a newspaper clipping. Reporter dies in lake crash. Boat capsizes during investigation. Her father's name below the headline. Her fingers tightened around the paper. "Dad, what were you chasing?" she whispered. A metallic sound answered, a faint clang near the next unit. She froze, light sweeping the dark. "Hello?" Silence thickened. Then another noise. Slow dragging footsteps outside. Someone moving along the gravel path, deliberate, testing distance. Clara turned off the light and crouched low. The footsteps stopped at her door. A breath later, a knuckle brushed the metal. 3 taps. Not loud. Polite. The same rhythm from the motel night. Her heartbeat was thunder in her ears. The door rattled slightly but didn't lift. Then a man's voice, low. "Clara, you shouldn't be here." "Ray?" she whispered back. No answer. Only the scuff of retreating boots and the distant slam of the outer gate. She waited 30 seconds before standing. Hands shaking, she gathered the most important folders and slid them into her bag. Whatever Ray wanted her to see, it wasn't meant to stay hidden anymore. When she emerged, sunlight fought the clouds in weak stripes. The guard looked up from his newspaper. "Find what you needed." "Not yet," she said. "But I found what someone didn't want me to." He raised a brow but said nothing. As she pulled away, she caught him watching her car mirrors until she turned the corner. Back on Main Street, the diner's neon sign flickered between open and OP. Inside, coffee steamed again. Conversation stopped again. June, the waitress, appeared with her cautious smile. "You're back," she said. "I never left," Clara replied, sliding into Emily's old booth. She set the recorder on the table like a weapon. "I have a few questions about the Harris family." June's eyes darted toward the kitchen door. "You shouldn't." "I'm already doing it." June bit her lip. "The sheriff's mother? She ran the asylum, didn't she?" A tiny nod. "Head nurse. They said she died when the dam broke. Some folks don't believe it." "Why not?" "Because," June whispered, leaning closer, "people kept seeing her after, by the lake, in the trees, wearing the same white shoes." "Ghost stories." June's eyes didn't agree. "You hear things long enough, they stop being stories." Clara clicked the recorder on. "Tell me everything." June hesitated, glanced around the empty diner. Her voice dropped to a trembling thread. "After the flood, they built the dam wall higher, covered the asylum ruins, but sometimes the ground gives. When it rains too much, water pushes old rooms back up. Couple of kids fell in one last year. Came out different." "Different how?" June's mouth moved, but no sound came. She just pointed at the clock behind Clara. It was 10:32. Clara turned back. "What does—" The bell over the door rang. Sheriff Miles Harris walked in, uniform dark with rain. He saw Clara, saw the recorder, saw June's face. His jaw set. "Miss Wren," he said evenly, "we keep meeting in all the wrong places." Clara smiled without warmth. "Maybe because the right ones are locked." He walked to her booth, rested his hand on the table's edge. "I heard you've been digging through county storage. It's called journalism. It's called trespassing when the locks say otherwise. You lost those files once before," she said. "Lucky I found them again." A muscle jumped in his cheek. "Those files are evidence in a closed case. Then reopen it. Not your call." She leaned in, voice low. "Your mother's name is on every death certificate, Sheriff. Every one." The diner went very still. Even the neon outside seemed to pause between flickers. He took a slow breath. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Then tell me." His eyes softened just for a heartbeat, then hardened again. "Leave it, Clara. I'm not your enemy." "Then who is?" He hesitated, then said, almost too quietly to hear, "The one still under." Before she could ask, he straightened. "Stay away from the lake tonight," he said. "Storm's coming." Then he turned and walked out, Rain following him like a loyal dog. June exhaled shakily. "You shouldn't push him. He's all that keeps this town from breaking open." Clara switched off the recorder. "Then maybe it needs to break." Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the metallic tang of thunder. She felt the day tightening around her, the way the lake tightened before swallowing something whole. The sky lowered through the afternoon until the clouds touched the tree line. Wind pushed through Havenridge, bending the birches until their bark peeled in thin curls. Clara drove without music, headlights on though it was barely 4. The sheriff's warning echoed behind the engine noise. "Stay away from the lake tonight." Warnings, she'd learned, were usually invitations. She parked by the church at the edge of town. From there, the path to the bluff gave a full view of Mirrorvale Lake, the water a single dull mirror holding the color of pewter. Across it, she could see the faint outline of the dam wall, high and black. If the asylum truly lay under there, it meant this town was built on top of ghosts and government lies. A perfect foundation for a dark crime mystery. She sat on the hood of the car, thermos between her palms, rain ticking its first small warnings. When she looked down at her reflection in the metal, she saw a second face beside hers. Quick, gone when she blinked. Her pulse spiked anyway. She slid off the hood and walked toward the narrow road that circled the hill. Halfway down, she heard the low grind of tires on gravel. A black pickup slowed beside her, passenger window sliding down. Ray Donovan leaned across the seat. "You don't listen well," he said. "Neither did you," she answered. "I opened your locker." His jaw worked, unreadable. "Then you know enough to leave." "Not yet. I know dates, I know names, but not why they're still dying." He looked past her toward the lake. "You think this town kills people? It's the opposite. It keeps them." "Then help me prove it," Ray sighed, rubbing rain from his forehead. "You ever heard of Havenridge's clean sheet policy?" "No. Every 10 years, anything that stains the town's image disappears. Files, photos, sometimes people. Started after the asylum flood. Your father tried to expose it." "And you helped bury it?" He didn't answer. Instead, he handed her a folded envelope through the window. Inside, a list of every missing person the county never logged. Starts 1959, ends last spring. Notice the initials at the bottom. She opened the flap. The list was short, 12 names, each paired with a date. The final entry read E.W., April 8th. "Emily Wren," she whispered. Ray nodded once. "Find the pattern and you'll find your cousin, but it won't bring her back." Before she could reply, thunder rolled so close it shook the truck's mirrors. He started the engine. "If you're smart, you'll get out before night." He drove off, taillights fading into the gray. Clara stood in the rain until the sound was gone. Back in her car, she spread the list on the steering wheel. Every date fell in early spring, every victim female, ages between 16 and 30. One more note scribbled in pencil beside the first entry. All connected to the water treatment committee. She frowned. Committee? In a town this small, every committee was the same handful of families. Harris, Dalton, Finch, Wren, her own father, all names that still mattered. All names still here. Her recorder clicked on automatically. She forgot she'd set it to voice activation. Her voice filled the car in a low whisper. "Dark secrets run like underground rivers. You don't see them until the surface cracks." She turned toward the main road. Storm sirens began their distant wail. The dam authorities signaled that overflow was expected. Rain hit harder now. Sleet mixed in. Visibility dropped to 30 feet. The diner's neon was dark when she passed it. Main Street empty. Only the sheriff's cruiser parked under the awning outside the town hall, its lights off, windshield glistening like an eye. She slowed. Through the rain-streaked glass, she saw movement inside. Miles Harris pacing in front of a bulletin board covered in old photos. For a moment, his hand pressed to one picture. Then he turned, saw her car, and the blinds snapped shut. Clara drove on, unease crawling the length of her spine. At the inn, Mrs. Dalton was stacking sandbags at the doorway. "Flood watch again," she said. "Same every year." Clara stepped closer. "You ever think the lake's tired of being ignored?" Mrs. Dalton gave her a brittle smile. "Water doesn't get tired, people do." Clara hesitated, then asked, "You were on the committee once, weren't you? Water treatment?" The old woman froze. "Who told you that?" "Records, my father's notes. You signed off on the new dam extensions." Her face turned a shade paler. "That was decades ago. But the disappearances started after." Mrs. Dalton's eyes flickered toward the window. "Stop counting ghosts, child. There's too many." Clara pressed. "My cousin's name is on that list. You know what happened." The woman's hands trembled as she reached for another sandbag. "Go before you drown in someone else's debt." Lightning bleached the room. Thunder followed like a slammed door. When Clara looked again, Mrs. Dalton had retreated into the back hallway, her shadow gone. The lobby smelled of damp plaster. Clara climbed the stairs, footsteps echoing louder than they should have. At her door, she hesitated, expecting another note, another sign of intrusion. Nothing. Inside, the air felt thicker, humid. The window fogged from within. On the desk lay her camera. She didn't remember leaving it there. Its red light blinked, recording. She picked it up, hit playback. The screen flickered, showing the empty room from a low angle. For 6 seconds, nothing moved. Then the curtain lifted as if brushed by a hand, though the window was closed. A shape passed across the lens, blurred, colorless human height, and whispered, "Leave the list." The clip ended. Clara's hand tightened on the camera until her knuckles whitened. Then she laughed once, sharp, disbelief slicing through fear. "You're watching me through my own gear. Nice trick." She unplugged the battery, threw the camera into the dresser drawer, and locked it. Her pulse refused to slow. Whoever they were, they wanted her to stop chasing the pattern, which meant the pattern was real. She spent the next hour sorting Ray's files on the bedspread. Old photographs of the committee lined up across the floral comforter. Lydia Harris, nurse supervisor. Thomas Wren, reporter. Arthur Dalton, engineer. 2 others she didn't know. Behind them, the dam still half built, water low. In the background of one picture, faint but visible, a chalkboard note. "Trial access complete. Chamber secured." Chamber. Her heart jolted. Under the lake? She traced the handwriting with her thumb. It wasn't her father's. It looked like Lydia Harris's looping cursive. Whatever chamber they sealed, it tied the committee together. Outside, sirens wailed again, closer now, wind bending trees until they thrashed like arms. She looked through the slit in the curtains. The lake had risen to touch the edge of the road. Streetlights flickered, reflections doubling in the black surface until it looked like there were 2 towns. One above, one below, waiting to trade places. Her phone vibrated on the desk. Unknown number again. A message. "You found the list. Find the chamber. Before he does." She typed back before thinking. "Who are you?" 3 dots blinked, then vanished. No reply. She sat on the edge of the bed, breath loud in the dark. The world outside cracked with lightning. Rain hammered the glass, the floor trembled faintly, the dam gates adjusting pressure. For a second, she thought she heard voices inside the rumble, hundreds of them murmuring names she recognized from the list. The sound faded, leaving only the beating of her own pulse. She whispered to the recorder, voice barely there. Every silence here hides a truth, and the lake has learned to speak through thunder. She didn't realize she'd fallen asleep until a knock pulled her up from the shallow edge of dreams. 3 taps, polite, measured, the same rhythm as the storage unit. Clara swung her legs off the bed, crossed the carpet, and put her eye to the peephole. Distorted hallway. Empty. Her breath drew a circle of fog on the door. "Who is it?" she asked, not louder than the rain. Silence. Then the whisper again, too close to be anywhere but the seam of the frame. "Clara." She unchained the door and opened it 2 inches. Cold air slid in, tasting of iron. No one in the corridor, only a narrow rectangle of light from the exit sign bleeding into the damp. On the floor lay another slip of paper. She crouched and lifted it. 4 words this time, written with a hand that knew how to keep secrets neat. "Where you first looked." The letters bled a little where the paper had gotten wet. She shut the door, locked it, and leaned back until the wood steadied her spine. "Where I first looked," she repeated. The lake house. Lightning clicked the room white and then gray. She pulled on her coat, pocketed the brass key, grabbed the envelope, and went back into the storm. The road to the lake house was more water than asphalt. Branches moved like animals. When she turned into the familiar lane, the pines bowed and then snapped upright again as if arguing with the wind. The house crouched ahead, 1 window lit. She hadn't left any lights on. She killed the engine and listened. Rain drummed the roof, and underneath it, the lake breathing, in, out, in. Every few seconds, a deeper sound rolled up from the dam, ancient and patient. Clara stepped onto the porch, wood slick, hand tight around the key. The door gave under her touch. Unlocked. She called Emily's name into the stale air, knowing it was a wish more than a question. No answer. Her flashlight cut the room into pieces. Table, torn map, the photo she'd left in her bag and not on the mantel. Except the photo was on the mantel now. Someone had put it there and smoothed it flat with careful fingers. "Okay," she whispered. "I'm here." The back of the house groaned. She followed the sound, light moving like a fish across walls, down the narrow hall to the door that opened onto the dock. The bolt was drawn. She slid it back and tasted the rain. The dock stretched into dark water, a spine of wood between 2 lungs of black. Out there, a single candle burned in a jar, another floating light 20 feet away. Held in place by a current she couldn't see. It flickered at her like a signal. She stepped onto the boards. They moved under her, swelling and releasing. Halfway out, she stopped and listened. Her name rose out of the rain, not loud, not soft. Just there. "Clara." She turned, light sweeping the rails, the posts, the water, the tree line. No one. "Clara." Again. This time from below. She leaned over the side, beam cutting into the water. The surface bounced the light back as broken coins. Nothing beneath but cold. "Emily?" The candle guttered and flared. Something bumped the underside of the dock, a hollow thud like a fist knocking from below. She dropped to her knees and reached between the boards. Her fingers grazed glass and rope. She drew the jar up onto the planks. Inside floated a strip of Polaroid and a small brass token on a chain. She unscrewed the lid with clumsy hands, slid the soaked photo free, and held it under the beam. The image was of a room, low ceiling, tile walls, a metal bed bolted to the floor. On the wall behind the bed, a number painted in black, 17. In the foreground, blurred by the quick snap of the camera, a shoe, white, rubber-soled. She looked at the token next, embossed on one side, MV, on the other, C, and a half-worn one. She didn't have to want it to know it. Mirror veil, Chamber 17. Wind pushed a sheet of rain across the dock, soaking the back of her neck. She slid the token into her pocket, tucked the picture inside the envelope, and stood. The candle's flame thinned, leaned, and clawed itself upright again. Behind her, the house door creaked. She turned fast, light catching a shape in the frame. "Ray?" He stepped onto the dock, hood down, rain flattening his hair. Water ran from his jaw like melted glass. He held his hands out, palms open. "I told you not to come alone." "You left me a note," she said. "Where I first looked." Ray shook his head once. "Not me." "Then who?" He scanned the tree line. "We don't have time. Show me what you found." She handed him the Polaroid and the token. He looked at the number and flinched like it had teeth. "They kept some treatment rooms under the new level," he said. "Secured them. Said it was for research, cataloging, legal proofs. Said they were dry. And some weren't." He closed his fist over the token. "C stands for chamber. 17 is the one they never logged." "Who's they?" Ray didn't answer. He glanced toward the far shore where the dam lights flickered and held. "We need to move. Tonight's the only night you can reach it without a permit." "Reach what?" "The access tunnel." He knelt, lifted the loose board at the dock's end, and slid out a narrow boat hook. Hooked onto a ring set flush with the lower side beam and pulled. Something below the waterline shifted, coughing up a line of bubbles. A chain rose, knocking against the wood like a clock striking. Ray hauled the chain higher and looped it onto a cleat. Where the water had calmed, a dark circle opened, a manhole-size, water turning in it like an eye. Clara stepped back. "What is that?" "Maintenance well," Ray said. "Leads to the inspection tunnel. They sealed it when the committee changed hands, but nothing stays sealed forever." Lightning flashed and froze them in negative. For that fraction of a second, she saw someone standing at the edge of the trees, hair plastered to a white face, dress clinging. Then there was only rain. Ray looked where she looked and nodded once, as if he'd seen the same thing and decided to let it pass. "Your father knew about the tunnels," he said. "He was trying to prove they were using them long after the flood." "For what?" Ray's mouth tightened. "For people they didn't want found." Clara felt the world shift a degree, the way it did when an elevator started moving. "Who's in Chamber 17? Ray's answer was not a name. "Not everyone down there is dead," he said. "Not right away." The rain eased for a breath and then returned harder. Ray pulled a coil of plastic from his pocket and snapped glow sticks to life, dropping 2 into the circle. They sank, then began to drift forward with a slow, stubborn motion. "Current's light. You'll have to crawl." "You want me to go in there?" "I want you to see it," he said. "I want you to understand why the sheriff keeps telling you to stop." Clara crouched by the opening. Cold climbed her wrists. She thought of the voices in the dam thunder, of the white shoe in the photo, of Emily's laugh at a barbecue last summer when she blew ash off a marshmallow and called it dessert. She could not bring the laugh back, but she could bring back what had swallowed it. "Okay," she said, voice level, "but you're coming with me." Ray hesitated. His face changed in that moment from stubborn to something like regret. "I can't. I have to keep watch. If anyone sees the light, they'll close the outer gate. If they close it while you're in there..." "What? I drown?" "You disappear," he said flatly, "like the rest. Then you open it back up. If I can." She looked into his eyes and found there the precise shape of exhaustion. Forgiveness he'd never be given and penance that never ended. "Give me 10 minutes," she said. "If I'm not back, I'll come in after you," he lied, and they both knew it. She slid onto her stomach, reached down, found the iron rungs under the lip. The metal burned with cold. The tunnel breathed up at her. air tasting of lime and flooded electricity. She climbed, feet into water first, knees, hips. The glow sticks ahead like two small moons rolling on a black machine. The sound changed, a deeper hush, an intimacy of echoes. She looked back once. Ray was a storm-soaked sketch against the doorway, a man-shaped absence of light. "Clara," he said, and his voice came into the tunnel in the shape of her name. "Don't touch the left wall. It's wired." She slid forward on her elbows, bag strapped crosswise, face inches from the surface. The tunnel narrowed. She willed her breath steady. One push, another. The glow ahead turned a corner and she followed, counting strokes to keep panic in its crate. The space opened enough to lift her head. To the right, a low arch. On the arch, painted numbers bleeding with age. C-17. She floated still, listening. A sound came from beyond the arch, not water, breathing. "Emily?" she said, and hated the way the hope cracked the word. The breathing paused, then continued a little slower, as if whoever owned it had just touched a scar and remembered its name. She pushed through the arch, feet bumping something on the floor, metal, chain. Her light caught three things at once: the tile, the steel bed, and the wall number from the Polaroid, big and black and undeniable. 17. Someone stood in the far corner, not moving, arms loose at their sides, head bowed. Clara whispered, "Hello," and out of respect or fear she couldn't tell, she did not say Emily's name again. The figure raised its face, wet hair stuck to cheekbones, eyes dilated huge in the low light. Not a stranger, not Emily, a woman older by 20 years, but with the same tense bones Clara had seen in the asylum photos. Her voice came thin, like a door opening behind a wall. "You're late," the woman said. "He's already here." Clara felt the tunnel behind her change temperature, a small wind shoved forward by the movement of something large. She turned her head toward the archway, light catching new ripples and throwing them back at the ceiling. At the far end of the chamber, a second door squealed. Footsteps, measured, polite. 3 taps against tile, then silence, as if even footfalls knew how to keep their voices down in Havenridge. The woman in the corner did not look at the door. She looked at Clara, and her mouth shaped a word Clara didn't want to understand. "Run," the woman said. Clara didn't move. She was looking at the doorway now, at the shadow pooling just beyond the threshold. Human height, uniform edges, the suggestion of a badge catching the glow and passing it along like a cruel idea. Her breath found the edges of itself. In the space between one inhale and the next, she understood 2 things with terrible clarity. The chamber was real, and the person who knew it best had followed her here. A voice came from the tunnel mouth, echoing until it wore an extra face. "Miss Wren," it said softly, "you really should have stayed away from the lake." The glow stick spun once in the thin current. The number on the wall did not blink. And the storm above them pushed its weight against the dam, patient as a hand. The voice at the tunnel mouth was calm enough to make the water colder. "Miss Wren," it said again, softer now, as if offering a seat instead of a threat. "You should have stayed away from the lake." Clara didn't turn fully. She edged her light to the wall instead, letting the reflected glow show her the doorway without giving him her face. The silhouette held, squared shoulders, a heavier frame. The suggestion of a badge. The echo did the rest, stretching the presence until it felt like the chamber had grown another person made of sound. The woman in the corner lifted her chin. "You said you wouldn't come tonight," she whispered to the shadow. "I say many things," the voice replied, almost kind. "Storms change plans." Clara measured the distance, 3 strides to the arch, 2 to the steel bed bolted to the floor, 1 to the woman. She chose the woman. "What's your name?" Clara asked, not loud, not pleading. The woman blinked through wet hair. Marion, she said, Marion Fitch. Clara knew that surname. The librarian. Mr. Fitch. Your father works at the library. Worked, Marion corrected in a flat voice. For them, without knowing. He shelved the records that should have burned. The shadow in the doorway shifted, a patient wait. Let's not turn this into a family drama, the voice said. This is a civic issue. Marion flinched. He says civic when he means clean. Clara spoke without moving her eyes from the door. What did they clean, Marion? Rooms, she said. Then names. Then years. Clara felt her pulse step over a threshold. Can you walk? Marion's mouth twitched. I can run. Good, Clara whispered. On 3. 3, Marion said and shoved off the wall first, catching Clara's wrist with surprising strength. They splashed through the shallow water, shoulders scraping tile, the arch swallowing them like a mouth. Footsteps followed. The same measured, polite pace as every knock Clara had heard since she checked in. She hated the way it sounded reasonable, like a conversation you could have while choosing flowers. Stop, the voice called, no urgency in it. You're going the wrong way. That tunnel kinks into a sump. You'll tire out. Don't listen, Marion hissed. He lies when he's sure, and he's sure. The glow sticks ahead bobbed, then steadied as the current found its habit. Clara slid after them. Elbows burning, ribs pushing against stone. Water climbed her throat. She made herself smaller, a letter curling into itself to fit the sentence. At the first bend, the world rolled. Left wall humming faintly, a coil of warning climbing her arm. Ray's voice filtered through memory. Don't touch the left wall, it's wired. She tucked her elbow tighter. Behind them, the footfalls stopped. A quiet scraping sound replaced them, a tool on stone, a key in a lock. Something practical, something that didn't need to rush. Faster, Marion whispered, before he opens the gate. What gate? You don't want to learn that word down here. Clara swallowed panic, counted strokes. 10, 15, 20. The tunnel opened just enough to lift her head again. Air tasted like old pennies. The anger that had been sleeping inside her since the first voicemail woke clean, without heat. That anger gave order to her breath. Right, Marion said. There. They pushed into a side throat and came up under an iron grating. Above it, a square of black that was slightly less black than everything else. Up, Marion said, and boosted Clara with both hands, as if they'd done this 100 times, as if the choreography had been rehearsed in some other life. The grate shifted, then gave. Cold night slammed down like a door opening. They tumbled out into air, into rain, into the smell of pine. The grating clanged back into place as if offended. They lay there a second, both listening for the sound of pursuit. Nothing. Marion laughed once, a dry edge. He won't chase in weather, he'll drive. Who is he? Clara asked, the question finally heavy enough to be what it was. Marion sat up and shook water from her hair. Up close, she looked older than the chamber light had allowed, lines etched like long quotations. You know his name? She said. But he's not the only one. This is a committee story. That's why it qualifies as a real crime mystery and not just small-town gossip. Clara pushed herself to her knees. They were under the collapsed boards of an old boathouse, the lake 10 feet away. The storm pushing small waves up to lick the moss stains. In the distance, a siren rose and fell, steady, indifferent, official. Can you get home? Clara asked. Marion smiled at the word, a cracked thing. Home is a clock that stopped. I can get hidden. You need to get smart. I thought I was. You're linear, Marion said. They're circular. Lightning stitched the lake to the sky. For a heartbeat, the world was a negative image of itself. In that flash, Clara saw the outline of Havenridge, The church, the inn, the square, superimposed over the lake like a double exposure. Two towns, one above, one below. "Help me," Clara said. "Tell me what Chamber 17 is." "Not a what," Marion said. "A when. It's the room they keep returning to whenever the pattern resets. When the list gets too long, they clean and call it flood control." "The list," Clara echoed. "I have it." She touched the envelope, still tucked inside her jacket. "And I have a key, C17. Marion's eyes sharpened. "Then you also have the missing half." "Missing half of what?" "The diary," Marion said simply. "Emily's." Clara's breath failed for a moment. "I found her blue notebook. It's mostly blank." Marion shook her head. "Not that diary. The one she made when she decided paper couldn't be trusted." "What does that even mean?" Marion closed her eyes like she was trying to see something written on the inside of her skull. "Emily volunteered at the library. She asked my father how people used to hide records. He said, in plain sight or in recipes. She laughed and said, 'Water rights too.'" Clara's mind grabbed the phrase like a rope. "Water rights. Not with ink," Marion said, "with what ink leaves behind." "Invisible ink?" Clara said, and hated how naive it sounded. "Not invisible," Marion corrected. "Dormant. You have the pages. You just haven't woken them." Clara stood careful in the slick mud and held out her hand. "Come with me. Tell me how to wake them." Marion didn't take the hand. She nodded past Clara's shoulder. Headlights slid across the far trees, slow as a thought you don't want to have. A vehicle eased onto the track above them, engine low. Not a chase, a presence. "He can't see this spot unless he already knows it," Marion whispered. "Meet me where the road ends and the lake begins." "That's every road here." "You'll know it by the way people turn around before they have to." Marion tucked herself into the shadow under the broken siding and seemed to find a seam in the dark. "Wait. How do I—" Clara began, but Marion was already gone. Not magic. Practice. The headlights stopped, then turned away, retreating toward the main road. The lake took a long breath and let it out again. Clara cut through the trees toward the lake house, every branch a finger, every fern a hand. The back door hung open where Ray had left it. The dock still moved on its own thoughts. On the table, the Polaroid she had taken from the jar dripped silently into a small puddle the shape of a mouth. She peeled off her soaked jacket. Her fingers found the blue leather notebook she had carried since day one, the one stamped with EW. The pages had always felt heavier than they looked. "Dormant," she said aloud. "Wake up." She needed heat. She needed time. She needed the kind of patience storms don't offer. The lake house kitchen still had a gas stove, the old kind that complained and then obeyed. She lit a burner, held a tablespoon over the flame until it warmed, then poured a little lake water into it. Steam rose in a small ribbon. She dipped the corner of one blank page into the warmed bowl and waited, counting under her breath. A suspense thriller trick to keep fear from getting too many words. Nothing at first. Then, slow as a bruise, a line emerged across the wet margin. Not ink exactly. A shadow of ink. Letters like footprints returned by a receding wave. She breathed too hard and the steam broke the line. She steadied her hands, tried again with a dry section. This time she moved the spoon closer to the page, not touching, letting the heat wake whatever chemical promise Emily had left behind. Words grew like film in a dark room. "If water has memory, it can keep mine." Clara swallowed a sound that would have been a sob if it had room. She turned another page and another, bit by bit, coaxing the writing from sleep. The sentences came like warning buoys rising after a storm. Short, necessary, afloat. Emily's voice, bright and thin and bent into caution. They call it the committee because cult would scare the church ladies. They meet when the reservoir is low. 17 isn't a number, it's a door that looks like a number. LH hates storms. She believes thunder carries names to the other side. If something happens to me, tell Clara, the Watcher is not a person, it's a position. Clara's chest tightened. She knew the initials without needing to write them out. LH Lydia Harris, Sheriff Miles's mother, head nurse, head everything. She read the next line twice before letting herself accept it. The sheriff doesn't know what he's protecting anymore. He just knows how. The wind shouldered the windows. The stove flame leaned and straightened, defiant and small. Clara turned one more page and blinked as the letters stayed stubbornly asleep. "Come on, Em," she whispered. "Not now." She moved the warm spoon along the line again and watched 3 words lift like something surfacing under a dock. "Find the room." She laughed then, harsh. "Already did." She told no one, told everyone. A car rolled past on the road above, invisible through the trees. With the stove off, she could hear the sound like a rumor. Tires deciding to slow and then not slowing. A minute later, a long horn, 2 short, 1 long, the dam authorities signaled that the floodgates were adjusting. The lake muttered back. Clara copied Emily's lines into her notebook the old way, pen scratching, her handwriting a little more jagged than normal. She added her own notes in the margins, a true crime habit she'd learned from watching her father annotate everything. Committee, Stoddard, Harris, Dalton, Wren, 2 unknowns, check minutes, waterboard. Watcher as roll, rotating, hereditary. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number, she almost ignored it. Then she read, "You're burning it." She looked at the stove, at the spoon cooling on the counter, at the page she'd been warming with her hand. She wasn't burning anything. But then she saw it, the faint brown halo beginning at the edge of 1 letter where the flame had licked too close earlier. She texted back before she could regret it. "Who are you?" The reply came faster than it should have. "Someone who was supposed to drown." "Marion?" she typed. The dots paused, then, "No." Her skin tightened. She tried a different door. "Ray?" "No. He drowns differently." The kitchen clock coughed a small gear forward. The world took a step with it. "What do you want?" she typed. "For you to read the last page the right way." "How?" "Not heat. Salt." She looked toward the door. The lake beyond the deck, rain making needles on its surface. Salt. She didn't have any here unless... She remembered Mrs. Dalton's packet of diner fries in her bag. The 2 unopened salt packets folded inside like secrets in church bulletins. She tore one open with her teeth and sprinkled a little along the blank page, absurd and exact. At first she felt ridiculous. Then as the crystals dissolved along the damp fibers, words rose in a pale line as if the page were a lake bed giving up a message. 17 is where they trade. Not people. Debts. Her fingers stilled. The word hooked into something old in her. The town's quiet, the sheriff's exhausted warning, Mrs. Dalton's brittle small talk, Ray's ledger of names. None of it had been random. They weren't killing at whim. They were paying for something and calling it order. A knock startled her so hard she smudged a line with her palm. 3 taps, polite, measured, the rhythm that pretended not to be a threat. Clara turned off the stove. The room lost its second heart. She closed the diary, slid it into her bag, and stood in the middle of the kitchen listening. No footsteps, no whispered name. Just the rain deciding to be louder. The knocks came again. Not at the door this time, at the window above the sink. She stepped carefully, every board remembering the weight of 2 girls who used to race from room to room screaming with summer. She lifted the corner of the curtain. A face stared back from the glass, her own. And then, A breath later, another face settled over it like a second mask, not hers. The overlay smiled the way her reflection had in the motel mirror. Clara didn't scream. She lowered the curtain, let the fear move through her and out like a wave dumping itself on a shore. Her phone vibrated again. "Don't open the door. He has the other key." She typed back with fingers that didn't feel connected. "C17. "Your room," came the reply. "Haven Inn. He copied the desk key years ago. He collects duplicates. It's his hobby." Clara closed her eyes once, hard. The diary wasn't safe here, but it might already be less safe at the inn. "Marion," she whispered to the empty air, as if the woman could hear names from miles away. "Where do we meet when roads end?" Outside, the lake's voice deepened. Storm stacking on storm, the dam laboring like a lung with too many jobs. She grabbed her coat, shoved the salt packets into her pocket, and stepped into the rain with the careful speed of someone walking through a sentence they weren't sure they'd translated correctly. On the porch, she paused, breath fogging. Somewhere down the slope, a door creaked open where no house stood. Her father's old warning rose up uninvited. If a town refuses to be mapped, it's because it wants to forget where it hid the bodies. Clara pulled the door shut behind her until the latch caught. A domestic sound that made the dark feel more formal. She followed the narrow path to the road, boots sliding, eyes adjusting to what little light the storm spared. The diary pressed against her ribs like a second heart. When she reached the bend where the trees stopped pretending to be patient, a single car rolled past with its lights off. It did not slow. It did not speed. It understood the weather the way the lake did, by listening to what it wanted. Clara kept walking. Behind her, in the empty lakehouse kitchen, the last damp page dried fully. Letters appeared a shade darker than the others, as if the sentence they spelled had waited the longest to be believed. "If I don't make it back, tell Clara. The watcher keeps minutes. The minutes are in the church. The key is under the baptismal font taped to the pipe. He prays with his eyes open." The wind turned the page gently and then left it. The stove ticked once as the metal forgot it had been warm. The Polaroid on the table finished drying and curled at the edges into a small smile that didn't mean comfort. Clara didn't see any of that. She was already halfway to the place where roads go quiet, where people turn around before they have to, repeating the line like a breadcrumb prayer in a dark crime mystery. The minutes are in the church. The key is under the font. He prays with his eyes open. The road narrowed until the trees learned each other's names. Clara kept her head down, rain cutting her face into smaller thoughts. The sentence beat in time with her steps. The minutes are in the church. The key is under the font. He prays with his eyes open. Havenridge Baptist sat on the rise like a memory refusing to be corrected. White paint, tall windows, a steeple that pointed at clouds instead of God. No lights on, but the front door waited the way doors do when they know who's coming. Clara tried it. Unlocked. She slipped inside, closing the storm out to a smear. The hush wasn't holy. It was padded, hospital thick, the kind of silence that collects on the bottom of a dark, secret story. Pine cleaner. Old hymnals, a clock that didn't apologize for ticking. She stood at the back a moment and listened to the wood explain itself. The baptismal font sat in the front, a stone bowl with a brass rim. She walked the aisle, eyes moving over pews where whole families had practiced forgiveness in public. The font's base was a single column. Beneath it, a narrow panel. She knelt, slid her fingers under the lip, and felt tape like a scar. The key came away with a soft surrender. A tiny tag dangled from it. CHM Church, minutes. Her breath left and came back differently. She looked around once the way a thief studies the air, then moved to the side door marked office in stenciled letters. Inside, filing cabinets, a desk, 2 chairs that had learned to hold secrets without squeaking. She checked drawers, sermons, rosters, donation envelopes. The cabinet closest to the window had a lock that looked shy about its own usefulness. The new key slid in, turned, and changed the room. Minutes bound with twine, labeled by year. 1958 through now. The handwriting shifted through time. Different clerks, different ink, the same neat insistence that everything worth happening does so in order. Clara carried the last 10 books to the desk and opened the most recent spring. Her fingers left rain on the paper. She wiped it away with the back of her sleeve and made the wet look like humility. Spring. Always spring. March 3rd. Committee met. Reservoir maintenance. Present, L. Harris, A. Dalton, T. Wren, observer, Pastor Cole, scribe. Her father, observer, not reporter. She swallowed the change. March 20th, weather watch, gates adjusted. Vote to approve emergency access to historical chambers for inventory. Motion carried, no details. A clean sentence like a lie. April 8th, brief prayer for the missing. No public notice. Emily's date. The letters looked like teeth. She went back a year. Same pattern. March, access. April, prayer. A ceremony of erasing, a circular crime mystery routine polished until it passed for policy. Footsteps clicked softly in the hall. Clara's hand found the lamp switch and snapped it off. Dark. The office door glowed faint around its frame, a cheap halo. "Miss Wren," a voice said from the nave. Calm, courteous, used to being obeyed. "You shouldn't be in here." She didn't answer. Leather creaked. A pew settled. The voice carried without needing to be loud. "My mother taught me to leave certain doors locked. You keep finding them." Clara skimmed the minutes without moving, eyes adjusting. Another entry. May 1st. Committee confirms clean sheet. Remove non-essential records. Her father had circled clean sheet in pencil, hard enough to dent the page. Beneath it he'd written, small. Not again. The floorboard outside the office gave a soft complaint. The handle turned. Clara stepped away from the desk and stood beside the filing cabinet, breath shallow and quiet, the way a swimmer's is when they read the lake's mouth. The door opened. Sheriff Miles Harris stood in the dim rain, folded into his coat, hat in his hand like he was interviewing grief. "Lights," he said, and flipped the switch himself. The room let itself be seen. His eyes went to the open drawer, to the stack of minutes, to the key in Clara's hand. He didn't look surprised. He looked tired in a way that made tiredness feel like an occupation. "You already know," Clara said. "I know what I'm allowed to say out loud," he replied. He set his hat on the desk and placed both hands flat beside it, fingers wide, like a man measuring an invisible map. "My cousin's name is in your prayers," Clara said, "but not in your reports." He didn't blink. "Not my prayers," he said. "The church's." "Convenient distinction," she said. "When did you start guarding minutes with badges?" "When we ran out of locks," he said. Clara kept her voice measured, steady, tuned for the mic she wasn't holding. "This is a psychological thriller to them," she said. "A ritual, a seasonal cleansing. You call it flood control, so it sounds like weather." Harris stared at the minutes a long time. "They called it that before me," he said. "Before my father. Before the dam grew a second wall." "And your mother?" He picked up a pencil and put it down again. "My mother did the paperwork people refused to look at. She hated storms. She said thunder carried names to the other side." A corner of his mouth moved. "You found that line somewhere, didn't you?" "Emily's diary," Clara said, and watched the small shock pass behind his eyes like a fish you don't tell your friends about because they'll want proof. "I didn't know your cousin," he said. "Not the way you think." She was just another girl who should have left town and didn't. She volunteered at the library, Clara said, with Marion Fitch. She asked questions, he said. The words sat between them like a sympathetic witness. Questions hurt here. They always have. Clara lifted the latest book of minutes and turned it so he could read. Emergency access to historical chambers. That's a phrase you use when you're about to rename a crime. He looked away. When the water rises, it finds what we hide, he said quietly. Better to move it before it surfaces. Bodies, she said. Debts, he corrected, his voice a hair softer. People pay and people get paid. That's how towns continue. Who collects? He didn't answer. She closed the book carefully, as if quiet could keep it from bleeding. My father tried to stop this, she said. You were there. I was a deputy, he said. I learned the chain of command version of courage. He met her eyes and didn't look away. It didn't make me strong. It made me thorough. Thorough enough to copy keys, she said. He didn't flinch. Your room at the inn is safe, he said. I don't go in where I can't testify I didn't. Then who does? He shook his head once. You're still thinking in people. Think in roles. Think in chairs that don't get up when the bodies do. Clara slid the minutes into her bag and left the older volumes where they were. Tell me where the chamber opens from the surface, she said. No, he said simply. Then arrest me, she said, and write evidence on me in blue ink, because I'm going anyway. He looked at her as if she were a patient who had chosen the wrong surgery. Go home, Clara. This is home. That's why it's dangerous. A long breath moved in him and out, altering nothing visible. Then he stepped aside. Take what you stole, he said. And don't come back tonight. She picked up the key. It isn't stealing if no one owns the truth. Everyone owns the truth here, he said. That's the problem. He let her pass. In the nave, the stormlight colored the windows, the gray of old glass. She reached the door, hesitated, and turned. You pray with your eyes open? She asked. When the roof leaks, he said, so I can put the buckets in the right places. She left the church with the key under her tongue the way people used to carry poison, meaning to spit it when they needed to. Outside, the rain had sharpened. Her phone buzzed. Don't go back to the inn, the unknown number said. He said it was safe. He meant for him. Where then? She typed, walking. The minutes heavy in her bag, the diary a pulse. Where roads end, came the reply. Past the waterline sign. Follow the fence until it stops pretending to be a fence. There's a gap. She reached her car and didn't get in. She walked instead past the motel drive under the sagging sycamore along the narrow strip where town gave up and lake began. A rusted sign announced a waterline no one obeyed. She stepped past it and felt the sudden change, as if the ground had switched languages under her feet. The fence ran on like a thought that refused punctuation. Then abruptly it ended. Not cut, not broken, just ended, the way a rule does when someone with a title gets tired. The gap fit one person sideways. She turned her shoulder, slid through, and found herself on an old service road half swallowed by moss. Glow sticks had been here earlier, thin arcs of green smudged against a rock like notes in a field guide. She followed them. The service road curved to a black door at the base of the dam, a door that wasn't a door until you asked it to be with a key shaped like a rumor. Her hand found a lock near waist height. The church key wouldn't have fit, but another key would, Ray's brass one, the one marked C17. She tried it. The tumblers answered with a wet sleep cough and turned. Inside, a stairwell spiraled down. Cold climbed. Light gave up. Clara switched on her phone's torch, and the white threw back a narrow future. She descended slowly, counting steps the way people count a child's breaths when they're listening for fever. At the first landing, something scratched the door below, a long, desperate sound that chose not to be urgent. She waited. The scratch came again, then stopped, like a clock being convinced to continue. Her phone buzzed in her palm. "Turn it off," the unknown number said. "He sees light better than he hears names." Clara hesitated and then blacked the screen. The stairwell changed shape when the light left. Sound approached from below, another set of footsteps, not hurrying, not creeping, the kind of pace that knows it belongs. She stepped to the inside of the stair, pressed her shoulder to the cold wall, and let the person pass the landing below without seeing her. The shadow moved like it knew the odds. The door eased open and closed again on its patient hinges. She counted to 50 before moving. When she opened the same door, the corridor beyond tasted of metal and old resolve. Her fingers found the wall, numbers stamped into paint at intervals. C, 13, C, 15, C, 17, 17 again. The number didn't blink. She listened. Silence, then a whisper, not a person. Water threading a grate. She tried the handle, locked. She slid Ray's key into the slot. Nothing. The lock wanted something older. She looked up. Above the doorframe, an access panel with 2 quarter-turn latches. She twisted them and lifted the panel aside. Behind it, a manual release, a simple chain hoist that looked like it had learned patience from the town. She pulled once, twice. The bolt sighed. The door surrendered. The room matched the Polaroid. Low ceiling, tile, bed. On the wall, 17. On the bed, a blanket folded like an apology. No one in the corner this time, no whisper. Just the sense that voices had recently left and would be back if she stayed courteous. She walked the perimeter, palm hovering an inch from tile, feeling for breath. By the drain, a bundle of cloth. She knelt and unfolded it. A shoe, white, rubber-soled. She forced herself to keep her hands light. Inside the shoe, wrapped in plastic, a page, handwriting intact, ink braver than it should have been. "If you found this, you either love me or hate me. Either way, read this in the rain, not under a roof. The lake will translate." Taped to the plastic, a second note in different script. "He's coming back. Leave now, or leave here." The door behind her clicked. 3 taps. Polite, measured. She stood very still, and for the first time since she arrived in Havenridge, she understood the difference between quiet and silence. Quiet is what a town uses to hear itself lie. Silence is what it offers before it tells the truth. Echoes of the past. The 3 taps at the chamber door sounded like manners pretending to be mercy. Clara didn't move. The shoe in her hand felt heavier than leather had a right to be. The wrapped page inside pressed against her palm like a pulse trying not to be obvious. "Miss Wren," the voice came, calm in a way that made calm feel cruel. "Open up. You don't want me to force this one." She slid the note and the plastic-wrapped page into her jacket, tucked the white shoe beneath the frame of the steel bed, and stepped sideways until her shoulder found the wall. Her breath made a small fog on the tile. She counted it down. 3, 2, 1. The door's latch turned a fraction and held. Locked again. A key scraped the other side. Polite, thorough. Clara reached for the chain hoist above the door, wrapped it once around the handle, and leaned her weight back. The lock protested. Metal complained at a pitch that remembered storms. "Last time," the voice warned. "Open it." "Then stop knocking," Clara said, and surprised herself with how even it landed. Silence. Then the key withdrew. Footsteps retreated 3 paces, not leaving. Listening. Clara pulled the chain once more, then let go. She needed out. Another exit, another lie that opened like a door. She scanned the ceiling. 2 vents, one near the number, one above the bed. She pulled the bed an inch, bolted. She reached the lower vent, tested the screws with her nails, loose enough to hope. She used the tiny key from the church minutes as a makeshift driver and began to turn. Outside, the footsteps returned, not to the door, but beyond it, to the corridor. A second set joined the first, lighter, quicker. Exhale. Marion. Don't, Marion said through the seam. He wants you to run up. He closed the next hatch. Clara kept turning the screw. What do you want me to do? Make him talk, Marion said. He likes hearing himself explain the rules. You talk like you've worked with him, Clara said. I did, Marion replied, as a patient. The second screw dropped into Clara's palm. She slid the vent plate aside and saw a crawl space just big enough for denial. She didn't climb. Not yet. You read the minutes? The man outside asked, voice closer again, as if he'd pressed his cheek to the door. Church says we inventory historical chambers each spring. That's order. That's safety. You mean that's branding, Clara said. You call it a dark water safety plan so it indexes higher than crime mystery covered by prayer. You really are your father's daughter, he said softly. He was good at turning words into knives. Did he cut you? Clara asked. Everyone bleeds here, he said. Some of us call it rain. Marion's voice lowered. He's stalling. He isn't alone. Others are coming. Clara slid the vent plate back into place, left the screws halfway, and moved to the drain. The grate lifted with 2 fingers. Someone had lifted it before, many times. She held her breath and listened. Water ran shallow beneath, hard right turn into a narrower conduit. Where does this go? She whispered. Toward the low sluice, Marion answered. You'll come out under the service deck if you don't get stuck. Not comforting. It's not meant to be, Marion said. Clara lowered herself until her shoulders met the frame, feet first into the drained throat, jacket scraping tile, diary pinned between ribs and fabric. The shoe's plastic crinkled inside her coat like a promise. The door latch ticked again. A different key tried and failed. Another. He had a ring of them, duplicates, variations, years of practice. Miss Wren, he said, and dropped the calm. You're not the first to think tunnels are braver than doors. I'm not brave, she said, and slid the rest of the way down. The water was colder here. It didn't move so much as remember how to. Her fingers found the conduit edge and pulled her along, elbows bruising, breath shallow to fit the space. Behind her, metal yielded. The chamber door opened to a long inhale. Footsteps entered, stopped, read the room the way men read maps that never included them. She's in the drain, the man said. Of course she is. Clara counted. 10 strokes, 15. The tunnel kinked and she became smaller to match it. Ribs, shoulders, hips. She told herself stories about air. She told herself this was an emotional thriller about debt and not about drowning. At the bend, a slot of light appeared an arm's length ahead. She reached it, pressed her face to the crack, and saw darkness that felt like freedom. The low space beneath the dam's service deck, metal ladders above, a grid of beams like a giant's ribcage. She shoved the grate up with both hands. It gave, then stuck. She pushed harder, shoulder, knee, prayer. The grate snapped open. Cold air rushed her mouth. She dragged herself out and lay on the damp concrete, palms stinging, chest refusing to hurry. Voices filtered through the deck's lattice. Not one, more now. Committee voices, or the sons of committee voices, wearing the same shapes in their throats. Not tonight. Already in. Clean it later. Clara rolled to her belly and slid toward the shadow, belly to concrete, the way animals keep themselves small when the sky is all eyes. Her fingers found the ladder. She climbed 2 rungs, then stopped. Above, boots crossed the metal grid left to right, pausing over the ladder hole for a single second like a hand laid on a fevered forehead, then away. She waited until the water learned this new rhythm and forgot it again. Then she climbed. The service deck smelled of oil, old bolts, wet steel. Clara kept low, moved between tanks and housings, the diary hard against her side. Ahead, a rectangle of exterior light, a maintenance hatch cracked with storm glow. Thunder shouldered the wall. Rain fell in sheets thick enough to be felt more than seen. She reached the hatch, pressed her eye to the seam, and saw the lake close, its surface kneaded by the storm into a skin that wanted to be muscle. She pushed the hatch. It opened an inch. A chain across it held the rest. Behind her, a voice. Marion, somewhere under the deck. Left, there's a tie. Pull it up. Clara reached into the shadow, found the tie securing the chain, and unthreaded it with fingers that finally stopped pretending they weren't shaking. The chain dropped soundless into grease. She slid out into rain. The dam's catwalk stretched to either side, a narrow metal ribbon with the lake on one hand and the spillway throat on the other. Below, water muscled itself through gates, white and loud, a sermon that didn't ask permission. Clara's hair plastered itself to her face. She wiped it away and started across. Halfway, a figure stepped from the far maintenance shed and waited where the catwalk narrowed. Dark coat, hat, no badge showing, no gun. He didn't need one. The storm had volunteered to be his weapon. "Turn around," he called through rain, voice practiced to be heard without seeming to shout. "This isn't a true crime story for the internet. This is infrastructure." "Words that bury people," Clara said. "Words that keep them from washing up where children might find them," he replied. She walked closer because stopping would have been the same as kneeling. "Who are you when you aren't a voice?" she asked. "Exactly who you think," he said, "but I carry more doors than names." "Do the doors have minutes?" "Everyone," he said. "Signed with ink that doesn't smudge in court." "Then sign this," Clara said and pulled the wrapped page from her jacket. "Emily wrote you into the lake. She left the rest at the church. I can wake all of it." He didn't flinch at her cousin's name. He looked past Clara, past the gatehouse, toward the town in the rain, a cluster of roofs pretending to be separate stories. "You love headlines," he said, almost fond. "He did too." "My father loved names," Clara said. "Headlines were the way he paid for ink." He stepped closer, rain learning his shoulders. "You think the watcher is a man," he said. "It's a position, someone to keep the ledger while the town keeps breathing. The chair counts, the body doesn't." "Who sits now?" He smiled, not unkind. "You wouldn't understand yet. Try me." "The watcher doesn't collect dues," he said. "He remembers who owes and who gets relief. Flood control is expensive. Investors like logic. We give them logic." "And the girls?" Clara asked. "Where do they fit in your logic?" He didn't answer. The storm answered for him, gates lifting another notch, the spillway bellowing like something with lungs. "You're going to fall," he said. "This catwalk isn't a courtroom, it's a reminder." "Of what?" "That the lake doesn't care about justice," he said. "Just gravity." Between them, the air learned to be colder. Clara realized then that he wasn't alone because no one ever is here. The town itself stood with him. Committee rooms, minutes, excuses, every dark secrets phrase they'd polished until it looked like policy. She tucked Emily's page back into her coat, edged to the side rail, and looked down. The spillway's throat took rain and returned mist. Somewhere under that white, a tunnel opened to where they kept the word 17 waiting. "I won't stop," she said. "I know," he said. "That's why you'll go quiet." A radio crackled from his coat pocket. A voice, flat. Gate 3's fouled, pause increments. He tapped the radio once but didn't lift it. His eyes stayed on Clara as if she were a problem that could be solved with enough math. From beneath the catwalk, a hand closed around Clara's ankle and squeezed once. Human, gentle, a signal. Marion. Clara didn't look down. She pushed her weight into the rail, made a show of shivering, took one half step toward the man like she had chosen to be reasonable. He relaxed a fraction. Marion's hand let go. Then the world shifted 1 inch, the faintest lurch as the gates paused, and in that inch Clara moved. 2 fast steps to the hatch she'd just exited, slid inside, slammed it, and threw the chain across. He reached it in 3 strides and rattled the door once. Steel obeyed steel. "Clever," he said through the seam. "Circular," Clara said, already moving along the narrow service corridor toward the secondary stair. "Like your minutes." He laughed, a single low note that hoped to be remembered. "We'll speak soon," he said. "Bring salt." The corridor bent. She didn't ask why he wanted salt. She understood. Salt wakes what water tries to keep polite. The stairwell down to the lower service bay spat her into a room that smelled of ozone and old apologies. Marion stood there, drenched, hair a rope. She handed Clara a towel she must have stolen from a break room and a look that said, "I told you he likes explanations." "He's not the sheriff," Clara said. "No," Marion replied. "The sheriff is a son. The watcher is a chair. Chairs outlive sons." Clara unwrapped the plastic from Emily's page. Rain had touched it but not erased it. The line at the bottom waited like a ledge. Trade, not people. Debts. Ledger kept by W. "W," Clara whispered. "Watcher," Marion pointed. "Turn it over." Clara did. A map bloomed faint in the damp. Emily's careful hand drawing lines she couldn't afford to label. Dots for doors, crosses for gates, a circle where the lake was deepest. Under the circle, one word, ledger. "Where?" Clara asked. Marion touched the dot nearest the church. "Under the rectory," she said. "A safe where kindness sleeps." Clara folded the page and slipped it back. "Then we wake it." Marion nodded, a quick bow to urgency. "Bring salt," she said. "He told you that because he wants to watch you choose it. He likes choices." "He likes control," Clara said. "That's all choices are." They moved together through the service bay, steps learning each other, 2 shadows walking with the storm for cover. Above them, the dam exhaled in increments, the lake translating the town's math into noise. Havenridge's lights flickered and steadied and flickered again as they turned toward the maintenance exit that led back to the road. The sign above it read, "Authorized personnel only," the polite version of no. Clara pushed it open with her hip and stepped into rain that had begun to soften at the edges. The way anger does when it realizes it will be allowed to finish. "We'll need the church key," Marion said, "and the one you carry for C-17. "I have both," Clara said. "I also have his attention." Marion gave that small, angled smile grief wears when it practices hope. "Good," she said. "Attention means he'll want to narrate, and narrators are the easiest to interrupt." They cut across the gravel shoulder onto the road that skirted the lake. Pines leaned in to listen. Somewhere far off, a dog barked exactly twice and decided not to be involved. "Marion," Clara said, breath fogging, "when you said you were a patient..." "I wasn't sick," Marion said. "I was useful." "How did you get out?" "I wrote minutes," Marion said. "Then I learned how to write names between them." "Emily learned it from you," Clara said. "Emily learned it from the water," Marion said. "I just showed her the spoon." They walked without speaking after that because some parts of a psychological thriller don't need words to keep their promises. The church roof appeared through the rain, a triangle of shadow against bigger shadow. Its windows were blank, Its doors practiced being harmless. Clara touched the key under her tongue with the tip of her teeth and tasted brass and doubt. "Ready?" she asked. Marian nodded once. Ready to wake what kindness locked up, the ledger of the lake. The church breathed like an old sleeper that refused to wake. Clara eased the side door with the CHM key and felt the lock give the way a secret does when it's tired of being important. Marian followed, rain wetting the aisle in quick commas. The nave was a gray bowl, soundless except for a drip somewhere that counted time without asking permission. "Rectory first," Marian whispered. "The ledger sleeps below kindness." They crossed past pews that had practiced forgiveness until the wood remembered the posture. At the sacristy, a second door waited, plain, narrow, the paint rubbed thin where hands always choose the same spot. Clara tried the latch. Stuck. Marian slid a fingernail under the strike plate and lifted it a fraction. "Old churches prefer finesse," she said. The door sighed open. The rectory smelled like starch and lemon polish. A lamp burned in the front parlor, low, patient, throwing a companionable light on a table stacked with newsletters and a porcelain dish full of keys that claimed to be harmless. Clara's breath shortened. "Someone's here." "Someone's always here," Marian said. "Kindness is a full-time job." Voices drifted from the kitchen, two men murmuring in that pastoral way people use when they mean to keep you quiet with tone. Clara pointed toward the back hallway. Marian nodded. They moved along the wall, feet remembering how to be soft. At the end of the hall, a closet door, half ajar, hid brooms and folding chairs and a box of hymnals with the wrong year. Marian knelt, pushed the lower shelf aside with a practiced thumb, and exposed a metal plate set into the floor. A ring in the center waited for a hand strong enough to admit the truth. "The safe?" Clara whispered. "The kindness," Marian answered. "Help me." Together they lifted. The plate came up on stiff hinges and a breath of cool air rose from below, smelling of old paper and money that had learned to wear prayers. A short ladder dropped into the dark. "Light?" Clara asked. Marian shook her head. "He sees light better than he hears names." They descended by feel, counting rungs, counting silence, until their shoes met cement. Clara's hand found a switch by accident and didn't flip it. Her phone's torch gave a quick silver sweep, enough to learn the room's edges. 3 shelves, 1 table, the outlines of boxes stenciled with years. On the table sat a book, not a book, a ledger. Thick, cloth-bound, corners bruised, the kind of thing that teaches numbers to behave. Clara opened it in the middle. Columns took a breath and became rows. Names, dates, amounts. Notes written in a hand that never hurried. Overflow repair, gate maintenance, emergency relief. And beside some entries, a small neat symbol, an O with a line through it, like a life preserver with a stitch across the mouth. "What's the sigil?" Clara asked. Marian's mouth tightened. "Paid in bodies." Clara swallowed air that didn't want to be swallowed. She turned pages. More names. Women. Spring dates. Checks balanced by the word credit in a column that didn't owe anyone an explanation. "This is the crime mystery the town calls accounting," Clara said. "They wrote the deaths like invoices." She ran her finger down this year's page. Her father's name appeared not as a victim, but as a line in the margin. TW petitioned audit. Denied. A month later, a thick entry for dam reinforcement with the symbol that meant a mouth sewn shut. Then, EW. Relief applied. No amount. Just the symbol. Clara's voice left her and returned smaller. "Emily," Marian touched her shoulder once. "Turn back," she said softly. "There's one more section." She pointed to a tab sewn into the binding near the end, color faded to the memory of red. Clara lifted it and found a second ledger stitched inside the first, a double book, two truths bound back to back. This one had fewer columns, only names, dates, and W at the top of every page, written the way a brand lives on skin. Watcher's Minutes, Marion said. Not the church's. The church would never call it that. Clara read down a page until she found the note that waited like a hand under cold water. W appointment confirmed. MH will serve as face, not as chair. Chair rotates by debt, not by merit. Miles, she breathed. He's the sun, not the chair. Chairs outlive suns, Marion said again, and the truth of it made the room colder. A floorboard above them murmured. Voices in the kitchen paused, then resumed in a register meant to cover noises in basements. Clara flipped to the last page. A list of keys on deposit, C11, C13, C17, and a final line. Ledger duplicate stored below north step. She checked the room. No north here. Marion pointed up. Outside, she said, under the church steps, in case the watcher needs to run. Clara closed the book. A copy means someone knew the main one could burn. A copy means the chair doesn't trust the pews, Marion said. They slid the ledger into Clara's bag and climbed back up, shoulders turned to hide their breathing. At the top, the rectory hallway paused in that polite way houses do when they're not sure who they belong to. The kitchen voices had moved. A front door opened, closed. Clara and Marion stood very still, hearing the house decide what to be. Then a new voice entered the parlor, male, pitched like a well-practiced apology. Evening, Pastor. I hope I'm not late. Clara looked at Marion. Marion touched two fingers to her own lips and then pointed to the front parlor doorway. They slid sideways along the wall until the threshold gave them a sliver of view. Pastor Cole sat in a chair facing the room. Across from him, Sheriff Miles Harris. On the mantel, a porcelain clock counted a decent rhythm. Flood levels? The pastor asked. Managed, Harris said. We'll open gate 3 later if the wind keeps forcing north. No evacuation yet. The women? Harris didn't answer immediately. He folded his hat the way men fold grief. Don't make me say it here, he said. Here is where we say what we won't write, Pastor Cole replied gently. Minutes protect charity, not conscience. Harris stared at the keys in the porcelain dish. My mother believed in forms, he said. She thought if you wrote the right words in the right boxes, the water would respect it. And you? I think the lake doesn't care about handwriting, he said. But I still fill the boxes. Pastor Cole leaned forward. You and I both know the chair will not spare you because you behave. Harris's laugh was too quiet to be a laugh. I know, he said. I'm the face, not the chair. Clara's pulse struck hard against the ledger in her bag. Confirmation burned without warming. Pastor Cole's tone softened the way you soften a blow by naming it advice. You can still send her away, he said. The cousin, the crime mystery storyteller. She is very good at turning minutes into headlines. She is very good at turning names into truth, Harris said, not looking at the pastor now. She has the ledger, doesn't she? Clara's body went still. Marion's hand found her wrist, warning steady as a metronome. Pastor Cole folded his hands. If she does, she will bring it here for safekeeping. All mercy returns to the font. Not this mercy, Harris said. This mercy grows teeth. A floorboard answered their weight behind them. Clara turned. The hallway was empty. No one. And yet the air had changed temperature the way a pond does when a current sneaks in. Marion leaned to Clara's ear. We can't go back out the side. Porch cameras. What about the north step? Basement window. Alley side. Clara nodded and they began to move backward, careful not to teach the floor anything it could use as evidence later. They reached the sacristy, slipped through and crossed the nave with their shoulders hunched against the great dark above them. At the north wall, a set of stone steps led to a side lawn. Beneath the bottom riser, mortar had crumbled into a small mouth. Marian knelt and worked her fingers into the gap until the stone remembered how to be lifted. A tin box sat in the hollow, flat, military, unmarked. She handed it to Clara. "Open it at the lake," Marian whispered. "Salt first, then read. He told you to bring salt because he wanted to taste your choice." "We don't have to," Clara said. "We always have to," Marian said. A door latch clicked somewhere behind them. They slid along the wall and were out into rain that had gentled to a steady sheet. Gravel shifted underfoot. The church lawn ran to the road, then fell to the shore. The lake took both without distinction. They didn't speak on the walk down. Words felt like nails in this weather. At the waterline, Clara knelt, tore a salt packet open with her teeth, and sprinkled a thin white ribbon along the tin box seam. The lid stuck, then sighed. Inside lay a second ledger, but this one was made to travel. Pages laminated in a way only fear approves, entries short enough to read in a storm. Clara opened to the last page. Ledger, duplicate to be used if the chair fails or forgets. Below it 5 columns: name, role, debt, credit, balance. And at the bottom, the part the town would never let anyone see. Watcher rotation by balance due. The names landed like small stones thrown into a shallow pool. Lydia Harris, Arthur Dalton, Thomas Wren, Cole. And something that wasn't a name but a set of initials that looked like they'd been written with a hand that refused to own what it had learned. R.D. "Ray Donovan," Clara whispered. Marian's face tightened. "I told you he drowns differently." A breath of wind moved the top page. Beneath it, in a corner margin, a note written in a different ink, newer, angrier. "If this book is open, the chair failed. If you are reading this, close the gates or close your eyes." Clara stared at the line until the lake gave her back her voice. "This isn't just a psychological thriller," she said. "This is an operating manual." A car door thumped on the road above. Headlights cut through the rain and found them at the shore like an accusation learning grammar. Marian didn't turn. She closed the tin box, slid it under her coat, and said the thing that keeps people moving when everything wants to stop. "Run!" The flooded truth rain erased the horizon. Clara and Marian ran along the bank until running stopped being faster than falling. The lake had swollen past its edges. Water lapped the road, claiming 1 inch after another. Behind them, the car headlights turned the rain silver, then red, then gone. "He'll flood the gates," Marian said, voice breaking against the wind. "He'll drown the evidence." "Not if we close them first." Clara's breath came in hard stutters. The tin ledger banged against her ribs under the coat. Lightning split the sky, and for one heartbeat, the dam looked like the spine of something alive. "Maintenance road," Marian shouted. "Back entrance." They followed the gravel curve until it collapsed into mud. The service door stood ahead, one hinge flapping like a flag. Clara yanked it open. Metal shrieked. Inside, echoes, generator hum, the sound of water massaging concrete. They moved down a flight of stairs, shoes drumming time with thunder. Every step carried the smell of copper and wet electricity. The control room waited at the bottom, a rectangle of flickering monitors, gauges trembling at the edge of red. A warning light pulsed. "Gate 3, manual override engaged." Clara froze. "He's here." Marian crossed to the panels, hair slick with rain. "If we cut power to 3, it resets. He'll need 10 minutes to re-engage." "Do it!" Marian's fingers flew over the switches. Sparks spat. The alarm pitched higher, angry at disobedience. Sirens answered from above, the dam complaining to the town that someone had touched its heartbeat. A shadow filled the doorway. "You don't listen, Miss Wren," he said. Sheriff Miles stepped into the light, soaked hat in hand, eyes exhausted enough to look almost kind. Behind him, two men in utility jackets, faces she recognized from the church photographs, older now, still committee quiet. "Move away from the board," he said. "No," Marion replied. "You'll drown them." "The gates are pressure locked," he said. "This isn't murder, it's equilibrium." "Equilibrium doesn't need names in a ledger," Clara said. His jaw tightened. "You shouldn't have seen that." "I saw everything," she said. "Even the column marked credit. That's what you call the people you let live, isn't it?" He sighed. "You want justice. Justice is just paperwork spelled with pain." Marion threw the main breaker. The lights died. Only the red emergency glow remained. Painting every face the color of blood slowed down. Harris swore, lunged for the console. Clara intercepted, shoving the ledger into his chest. "Read it! It's your confession written decades before you were born." He caught it by reflex, looked down, saw his mother's handwriting. The anger cracked. Something older bled through. "My mother wrote minutes, not curses," he said. "She wrote both," Clara said. "And you've been signing her initials ever since." He raised his head slowly. "You think the Watcher is a villain? It's a job nobody wants. Someone has to balance the water. Someone has to decide whose weight the dam can bear." "Then quit," she said. He almost smiled. "You can't resign gravity." Marion grabbed Clara's sleeve. "The bypass hatch, now!" They sprinted down the side corridor toward a lower platform. Behind them, the sheriff shouted orders, boots striking metal. Sirens deepened. The building shook, a sound like the world yawning. The corridor ended in a grated walkway over churning black water. Below, the spillway opened and closed its enormous mouth. Clara slammed the wheel for the secondary gate. It resisted, then turned, moaning. Water roared upward through the bypass, forcing air that smelled of rust and ghosts. "What are you doing?" Marion yelled. "Giving the town what it buried," Clara said. The bypass released. The lake answered. A column of water surged back through the auxiliary pipe into the sealed chambers where the old asylum rooms slept. Concrete groaned. Above, alarms cascaded into one another, a choir of panic. Miles appeared on the catwalk, gun drawn, face pale in the strobe of warning lights. "Stop!" he shouted. "You'll tear the dam." "Then maybe Havenridge learns how to swim," Clara said. He aimed at the wheel. "Step back!" The gun cracked. Metal screamed. A bullet sparked off the rim, ricocheted, bit the wall. Marion flinched but kept her grip on the handrail. Clara turned slowly, the roar filling her skull. "You kill me, the water still rises," she said. He hesitated, the gun trembling. "This isn't about you," she said. "It's about debt." His voice dropped to a whisper the storm could barely hear. "We all owe something." "Then pay," she said, and spun the wheel again. The gate below gave way. A blast of water erupted, lifting mist and memory. The catwalk shuddered. Harris staggered, dropped the gun, caught the railing. The mist swallowed him for a second, then cleared enough to show him clinging there. Eyes wide, not with fear, but recognition. "My mother said thunder carries names," he shouted. "She didn't say whose." Lightning cracked. The bolt hit the dam's crown. The world turned white. When sight returned, the sheriff was gone. Clara and Marion crouched together, coughing water and disbelief. "Come on," Marion said, pulling her up, "before the whole town wakes." They climbed the emergency stairs, boots slipping on the slick metal, until a door burst them into open air. Rain fell sideways. Sirens wailed from Havenridge proper. The lake no longer breathed. It roared. Below them, through sheets of rain, the gates opened unevenly. Water spilled over the road, down through the hollow streets toward the church. Every lie the town had stacked neatly was being rearranged into honesty. As they ran until the dam shrank behind them and the town rose out of the rain like a guilty witness. Havenridge's main street glittered with water, reflections bending storefronts into soft lies. Power flickered. The diner's sign pulsed open opa like it couldn't decide if Mercy should have hours. Marion grabbed Clara's arm and pulled her into the lee of the drugstore awning. "The church first," she panted. "If the ledger was the operating manual, the minutes are the ritual. We break one, we break both." "Pastor Cole will be there," Clara said. "He'll be anywhere the word collection learns to sound like prayer." They splashed past the laundromat, washers humming, windows fogged by abandoned cycles, and up the slope toward the white steeple. The bell wasn't ringing. It felt like the kind of quiet a throat makes after a scream. The north steps were a shallow river. They climbed anyway, hands sliding along railings gone slick with moss and truth. At the side entrance, the door stood ajar, a triangle of dark that tasted like lemon cleaner and wet paper. Inside, the nave held its breath. A few battery lamps glowed along the aisle, making islands of gold in a gray sea. Pastor Cole knelt at the front, sleeves rolled, stacking hymnals on a tarp like a man who understands the word triage. Two deacons moved chairs onto risers, faces composed with the dignity of useful men. Cole looked up. "Miss Wren," he said gently, "we're sheltering people here. The floodlines are uncertain. Will you help, or will you hunt?" Clara stepped into the light and didn't answer either kindness or trap. "I need the vestry key," she said, "and the undercroft." He studied her a long second. "You were always going to be like your father," he said softly. "He made the town look at itself. It didn't like the mirror." Marion came up beside her. "Open the undercroft." "Marion," Cole said, and sadness rippled his voice. "I hoped you'd left." "I did," she said. "The town didn't." He took a key ring from his belt and weighed it in his palm. "I am not the watcher," he said, "but I was taught to keep the minutes that keep us from tearing." He walked toward them, steps slow. "You opened something tonight." "We returned what you hid," Clara said. "That's what a crime mystery does when it remembers it's about people." Cole nodded once like he agreed and hated the math. He handed Clara 2 keys, 1 brass, 1 iron. "Door to the vestry," he said, "and the hatch near the font." "Thank you," Clara replied. "Don't thank me," he said. "I am late to my own repentance." They moved to the side door down the short stair into the undercroft. Water had found its way here too, thin streams along the floor, a chorus of drips. The room smelled of damp songbooks and metal. Clara used the iron key on a square hatch set into the wall below the font's plumbing. It opened with a sigh, like someone finally allowing a secret to be their size. Inside, a shallow compartment with a single tin cylinder and a packet wrapped in oilcloth. Marion took the packet. Clara lifted the cylinder and shook it lightly. Pages shifted inside, rolled minutes ribbon-tied. They carried both to a folding table and worked the knots with wet fingers. The oilcloth held a stack of photographs, grainy, flashlit, stamped with dates. Asylum rooms half collapsed, clocks with hands stuck at 2:13. Names chalked on tiles like attendance in a class that never dismissed. The cylinder gave a final squeal and yielded the roll. Clara spread it gently. Handwriting marched in a tight, trained line. Special session, reservoir access, inventory and relief. Signs beside each name. L. Harris, A. Dalton, Cole, scribe. T. Wren, observer removed. She traced the words observer removed with her thumb. The letters dented the paper where the hand had pressed too hard, like the writer had wanted to break the page but settled for scarring it. These are the minutes the church didn't keep upstairs, Marion said. The ones that know how the watcher counts. A hiss of rain tightened to a line outside the small undercroft window. Clara turned a page. A list. Relief candidates. A note at the bottom in tidy script. Balance moved to C17 ledger. Then another line in different ink hurried, angry. Not people. Debts. Remember. Her hands shook. Emily wrote that, she whispered. Marion ran her finger along the edge of the photo stack. She walked these halls, she said. She must have known this compartment. She left us a trail she thought we'd be brave enough to read. Footsteps above, heavy, then lighter. Voices asking where to put blankets, whether the north door should be sandbagged. The church-breathing community like oxygen because that's what churches do when towns think they're drowning. Cole's voice filtered down the stair. If you find anything that looks like a ledger, bring it to me. Clara and Marion looked at each other. Marion whispered, "He's trying to do the right wrong." Clara rolled the minutes and slid them into her bag with the duplicate ledger. "No single man gets to hold the truth now," she said. "We open it in the square." "That's theater," Marion said. "He prefers liturgy." "Then we give him both." A psychological thriller works because the audience recognizes its own secrets. They climbed back up with the cylinder box under Marion's coat. In the nave, people had begun to arrive. Wet hair, wet shoes, faces set to practical. A woman Clara had seen pouring coffee at the diner guided children to pews. The fisherman with the red cap stood in the aisle holding a stack of blankets like a man holding a chance to be forgiven. Cole met them at the side aisle. His eyes went to the bulge in Marion's coat and then to Clara's bag. He didn't reach for either. "Speak quickly," he said. "There's time for mercy before there's time for debate." Clara stepped onto the chancel step and turned to the room. The words came the way they do when fear stands aside for purpose. "This is Havenridge's ledger," she said, holding the tin book high. "And these are the minutes you weren't invited to sign." Murmurs wound through the air like a fuse. She laid the duplicate ledger on the communion table and opened to the last page. Names and numbers meant to be unreadable in storms became suddenly very legible in the battery lamp's small halos. "Lydia Harris," she read. "Arthur Dalton, Pastor Cole." She paused, let the names settle like silt. "Ray Donovan?" A breath of disbelief moved through the room, then a hard quiet. The fisherman lowered the blankets until they rested against his chest. Cole did not flinch. He stepped beside Clara and faced the people he'd baptized, buried, married, advised. "I kept minutes," he said. "I shouldn't have. My handwriting was too confident." "Your handwriting was obedient," Marion said. Cole nodded once, accepting the shape of the word. "The ledger says we paid debts with silence," he said. "It does not say we paid with lives." Marion's voice was steady. "The symbol for credit isn't a dollar, it's a closed mouth." Clara turned to the rolled minutes and unspooled a page. "Emergency access, C17. Relief candidates, approved. Observer removed. Ink bled where water had visited and left again, but the sentences held." The church doors swung open hard. Miles Harris stepped in, hat gone, face pale, uniform heavy with rain and damp air. He stopped when he saw the ledger on the table. His gaze traveled to the minutes in Clara's hand, then to the congregation, then up at the crucifix like he meant to ask it to recuse itself. Clara didn't speak. Miles did. "My mother kept forms," he said. "She believed forms could catch floodwater. She wrote names so the town wouldn't drown in them. I inherited her pens and not her belief." A man in the back called, "Did you drown our daughters?" No one shushed him. Some truths earn volume. Miles swallowed. "No." He looked at Clara. "I kept the gates. I did not choose the names. Who did? Marion asked softly. He looked toward the back of the church where the darkness grew thicker and then moved, separating into two figures. The utility men from the control room, jackets zipped to the chin, committee faces taught to be useful. And behind them a third shape, hat brim low. Ray Donovan. He stepped into the light, limp understated, eyes not surprised to see his initials in Clara's hand. I kept lists, he said. Not because I loved lists, because someone had to remember the part the minutes wouldn't write. You were part of the committee, Clara said. I was the nail, he said. They were the hammer. The watcher is only a word until it has a wall to hang on. The room hummed, a low, disbelieving note. June, the waitress, stood near the aisle, mouth open, cross at her throat, trembling against her collarbone. Cole raised a hand. No shouting, he said. Floods don't need help rising. Clara opened the duplicate ledger to the balance page. Ray Donovan, balance due, one name owed, she read. What does that mean? Ray's mouth worked, found a shape, rejected it, found another. It means I owed the town a life, he said flatly. It means they measured my debt and decided who would pay it. Who? Clara asked. The building answered. A deep shudder ran through the floorboards, up the pew legs into ribs and teeth. Somewhere outside, a transformer blew. The lamps faltered, rallied, learned to be brave. Ray's eyes met Clara's. Your father, he said. He saved my job when I should have lost it. The ledger counted that as a debt. The chair balanced it. The air left Clara like a decision. For a second, the room blurred. Then she stood inside the blur and let the pain sharpen everything it didn't kill. You owed a life, she said, and the town chose my father. No, Ray said. The town chose me not to pay it. The chair paid it forward. What does that even mean? Someone cried. It means balance, Miles said hoarsely. Not justice, not mercy, math. Marion stepped to the table and placed the oilcloth photos beside the ledger. Rooms, beds, the number 17. She slid the last one forward. Emily's Polaroid, the shoe, the white sole. Balance is a word men use when they need to forgive a system that makes sense on paper, she said, and kills in water. For a breath, the church held a charged stillness. The people gathered there were not a mob yet, and not a congregation anymore. They were a town listening to itself admit something it might never forgive. Outside, the siren changed tone. No longer the dam's voice, but the county's. Evacuate low streets. Water began to whisper under the door. Cole looked at the rising line along the threshold and then at Clara. What now? He asked. Clara put both hands on the ledger and spoke the thing she had carried since the bus hissed her into Havenridge. We open the book, she said, and we say every name out loud. Then we shut the gates before the lake takes another word. Miles Harris nodded once, as if the permission to be better had finally arrived wearing its own uniform. He turned to the utility men. Gate room. Now. And the chair? Marion asked. Miles's eyes went to Ray. Ray looked at the floor. The chair is whoever is willing to be hated so everyone else can sleep, he said. Tonight that's me. No, Clara said, voice steady. Tonight it's no one. She lifted the ledger. We dismantle the chair. We keep names with hands, not with walls. Miles took a breath, tasted the idea and let it in. Then let's earn being forgiven, he said. Open your true crime ending, Miss Wren. Make it a beginning. Clara turned the page. Her mouth shaped the first name. The town leaned in to hear itself. The chair falls, silent. The names rose like bubbles in dark water. Each one spoken, each one a sound the town had forgotten how to pronounce. Clara read slowly. her voice steady against the roar outside. With every syllable, the church seemed to breathe differently, walls loosening, air shifting as if the dead were leaning closer to listen. Eleanor Price, Martin Holt, Emily Wren. The last name fractured something in her throat. Marion laid a hand on her shoulder, gentle but grounding. Pastor Cole closed his eyes. "Forgive us," he whispered. "Or at least, see us seeing you." The sirens beyond the church faded into the wet wind. Only the water remained, lapping the steps, pressing its weight into the foundation like an audience asking for an encore. Miles Harris stood near the door, radio pressed to his ear. "Gate 3 dropping," he said. "Manual overrides responding." He looked up, met Clara's gaze. "You did it." "No," Clara said softly. "Emily did." She turned another page in the ledger. Beneath the names, an entry written in new ink, perhaps by Ray, perhaps by whoever the chair had used last. "If the book is read aloud, balance resets. The town will remember, but the lake will not forgive." The words sank into her. "What does that mean?" Marion exhaled. "It means the flood doesn't stop until the story finishes." Ray, standing apart near the font, laughed once, a low, cracked sound. "You want endings. There aren't any. Just quieter starts." "Then start something worth keeping," Clara said. He turned his head toward the doors. "You might get your wish." The building groaned. The glass in the high windows shivered, then bowed inward under the pressure of sound more than storm. A deep hum like machinery remembering its heart. Somewhere under Havenridge, gates moved. Miles shouted into the radio, "Lock secondary valves! Pull the generators!" Static answered. Then a voice, thin, frightened. "We lost control. Gate 4's opening itself." The congregation stirred, panic rising, but Cole's voice, hoarse and surprisingly firm, cut through. "Stay calm. The Lord is not in the thunder," Marion muttered. "Maybe he should be." Clara folded the duplicate ledger, slipped it into her jacket. "We need to get to the dam. If the chair's gone, the system's eating itself." Miles nodded. "There's a maintenance tunnel behind the church, old service line. It runs under the hill." Cole looked at them both. "If you go down there, you may not come back." "Then we finish what the minute started," Clara said. She turned to the crowd, voice raised just enough. "Stay inside, high ground, lock the doors behind us." A few nodded, some prayed, others simply stared. The town's silence had learned to speak in too many dialects to agree on one. They left through the vestry door into a yard washed clean of everything but moonlight. The rain had thinned to mist, soft as breath, but the roar beyond the ridge was rising. The lake had found its old borders and was arguing with gravity. The tunnel entrance waited behind a stand of pine, an iron hatch flush with the earth, padlock rusted to memory. Miles broke it with the butt of his flashlight. "After you," he said. Clara descended first, ladder slick, air close. The tunnel curved toward the dam, lit intermittently by old safety bulbs that pulsed like dying thoughts. The floor trembled beneath each gust of machinery above. Marion's voice echoed softly behind her. "You ever think the lake's alive?" Clara smiled without humor. "If it is, it's got a better memory than we do." At the bend, the light failed completely. Miles switched on his flashlight, beam slicing the dark. The tunnel walls were lined with pipes, one of them vibrating, water moving fast inside steel. "Pressure building," he said. "Gate 4's taking more than it should." "How long before it bursts?" Marion asked. "Depends on how guilty the town is," he said, and it almost sounded like a joke. They reached a junction where the tunnel forked. A metal door stood to the right, labeled Valve Access. To the left, a narrow catwalk dropped toward a maintenance platform with a grated floor. From below came the slow drip of water, rhythmic, patient. Clara hesitated. Which way? Miles checked the markings with his light. Right leads to the manual releases. Left's the overflow, old asylum drainage. The flood'll hit there first. Clara turned left. Then that's where we go. Marion caught her arm. You're chasing ghosts. I'm following instructions, Clara said. Emily's last note. Read in the rain. That means where the lake writes back. They moved along the catwalk. The metal sang underfoot. The air turned colder, thicker with the scent of algae and history. Somewhere far off, a metallic crash reverberated, something large surrendering. When they reached the platform, Clara aimed her flashlight downward. The water there wasn't black anymore. It shimmered with a faint, unnatural glow, as if the flood itself remembered letters. Symbols drifted in the light, loops, lines, numbers, traces of ink mixed with minerals, messages the current refused to forget. Is that... Marion began. Writing, Clara finished. Emily's writing. It's in the water. The glow brightened when she stepped closer. Words rose, rearranged themselves in streaks along the surface. They formed sentences, shaky but legible. The chair isn't a person. It's a promise. When the ledger ends, the lake begins. She encoded it, Clara said, awed. She turned the ink chemical, reactive with salt and iron. Miles frowned. That's impossible. She made the lake her diary, Marion whispered. Every name, every date. The light shifted again, ripples turning into faces. Fleeting, gone before belief could catch up. Men, women, children. Each appeared, mouthed something like a name, then dissolved into the current. Clara swallowed hard. They're asking to be remembered. Miles's radio crackled again. Sheriff, you there? Dam integrity compromised. You've got 5 minutes before it goes. He turned it off. We don't have 5. The glow below them pulsed once. Slow, steady. Then a voice, not human but layered. Water through metal, wind through vowels. Balance reset, chair released. The platform shuddered. A new rumble rolled through the tunnel, louder than before, coming from everywhere and nowhere. The sound of a system unlearning obedience. What did you do? Miles asked. Clara stared at the glowing water. I think Emily just ended Havenridge's contract. Marion grabbed the railing as a burst of spray shot up through the grating. The glow flared bright, blinding, then died to blue embers. Above, a thunderclap ripped the ceiling. Concrete dust rained down. Miles shouted over the noise, "The dam's giving!" We have to get out, Clara said. They turned back toward the junction, but the tunnel behind them was already half full, water boiling in fast. The way home was closing. Marion pointed upward. Emergency vent shaft, there! A ladder climbed to a circular hatch. They waded, climbed, shoved it open. Cold air slammed their faces. They emerged into a storm-scoured night, the dam's crown ahead, water spilling over its lip in white fury. Miles dragged himself out last. If we can drop Gate 4 manually, we might save what's left. Clara looked back toward the lake. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw the faint glow again. Words fading beneath the waves, final lines of Emily's story. When the chair falls silent, the water remembers it's dead. She turned to Miles. Then we finish it. They ran toward the gatehouse, the roar behind them growing until it was all there was to hear. The wind shoved them sideways as they crossed the crown of the dam. Spray leapt the rail like hands. Clara kept one palm on the catwalk and the other over the ledger under her coat, as if the book could drown without her noticing. The gatehouse door banged in the storm, half latched, half angry. Miles shouldered it open. Inside, red alarms pulsed, gauges jittered, and an emergency schematic quivered on an old monitor. Gate 4, failure, manual only. Marion wiped water from her eyes. "Show me the wheel." Miles led them to a steel column with a waist-high crank and a locking dog welded on like a warning. "Two people," he shouted, "opposite directions. When it bites, don't let go." They took positions. Clara and Miles at the handles, Marion bracing the pawl. The first turn didn't budge. The second screamed like metal remembering pain. On the third, the dog slipped and the wheel lurched, smashing Clara's shoulder. She grunted, reset, and pushed again. "Come on," she said through teeth. "Move." Something gave deep below. The wheel started to turn. Marion slammed the locking dog down a notch at a time, catching the gate's weight before it could chew the wheel backward. "Halfway," Miles gasped. "Keep going." They pushed until nausea crowded their throats, until breath came as fragments, until the world narrowed to a circle of steel they refused to let win. Then the wheel hit a stop with a dull, final thud. The alarm softened from panic to complaint. Miles sagged against the column. "Gate 4 seated." The floor shivered once, twice, like a beast settling into a new idea. Outside, the spillway's roar lowered, a pitch down the throat, not quiet, but no longer feral. Clara stumbled to the window. The lake still boiled, but the edge had pulled back from the road, revealing the drowned white line like a scar. Havenridge flickered. Somewhere a bell rang, the way metal rings when it forgets it was shaped by hands. Marion leaned on the sill beside her, rain stripes on her face. "Not justice," she said softly, "but less drowning." Footsteps thudded on the catwalk outside. 3 men shoved in, utility coats dark, faces lit with adrenaline and something more calculating. Behind them, water ran from a fourth figure's hat brim like a curtain. Ray Donovan. He took in the wheel, the locked dog, the alarms down to amber, and nodded once, as if scoring an exam he'd proctored too many times. "You picked the right gate," he said. Clara didn't waste breath. "Are we finished?" "Systems stabilize," Ray said. "Then memory starts." "Memory?" Miles asked. Ray's gaze flicked to him. "You really never read your mother's second book." "She hid it," Miles said. "She filed it where you wouldn't look," Ray corrected. "Under charity." Another tremor rolled through the building, slower, deeper. The emergency schematic blinked. A new warning crawled across the bottom. "Archive channel. Active." Clara frowned. "What is that?" Marion's mouth tightened. "The tunnel where the asylum kept its records. When flood hits certain marks, the channel opens to purge air and equalize pressure." "Meaning?" Clara said. "Meaning the lake returns what the town filed away." A smell rose with the tremor. Wet paper, old ink, iodine. The antiseptic ghost of a ward that had learned to float. Through the rain-slick glass, the water surface shifted from black to bruised silver threaded with pale shapes. Miles backed from the window. "Bodies?" Marion shook her head once. "Not bodies." She pointed. "Pages." They were pages and not pages. Scraps, ribbons of ledger, strips of photographs, tags, cloth labels, even the patient bracelets from the old asylum, all surfacing in a slow, stubborn line like a confession written in handwriting only water can teach. Clara's breath caught. One band flipped, flashed EW in a quick mirror of lightning, then sank, then rose again in the curl of a small wave. The utility men swore in low, reverent voices. Ray didn't swear. He watched the surface the way a man watches a door that always opens the wrong direction. "Town Square," he said finally. "It'll drift there. The current makes a loop when Gate 4 seats, always has." "Then we go," Clara said. Miles grabbed her arm. "Square's low ground. People are sheltering in the church." "Exactly," Clara said. "They should see what the lake brings back." Ray tilted his head, weighing her tone, the ledger, the storm. "You'll tear it all open?" he said. "No chair, no bargains, just raw names and receipts." Clara met his eyes. Then Havenridge decides what to be when no one is keeping minutes. For a breath, Ray looked older than the dam. Then he turned to the utility men. Open the walkway. Clear debris. If we're doing this, we do it without more dead. Miles keyed his radio, voice crisp. All units, gate 4 seated, evacuate to the church and square. Prepare for recovered materials. Do not destroy anything. Static. Then a shaky acknowledgement. They moved out onto the catwalk, down the service stairs, across the slick spine of the dam toward the road. The rain fell with new manners. Softer, steady, almost apologetic now that it had said what it came to say. Halfway down the slope, a Chevy fishtailed to a stop, passenger door thrown open by a woman with a flashlight clenched in her teeth. June. Her hands shook, but her voice didn't. Get in. 4 of you. The rest follow the ditch, road's a river. They piled in, the car smelling like coffee, soap, and adrenaline. June gunned the engine, tires biting water, and fishtailed onto Main, which had learned to be a creek. People moved along the edges in files, blankets over heads, children lifted to shoulders. The church doors stood open, battery lamps making honey out of rain. Cole shepherded bodies inside with the calm of a man who would collapse later. What happened up there? June asked, eyes forward. The chair fell silent, Marion said. June nodded once as if that sentence, too, belonged to Havenridge. I'll park where the square starts, she said. It's already collecting. They skidded into the lot beside the statue of the town founder, the one whose bronze hand had always pointed at the lake like a courtroom exhibit. The square beyond had become a shallow bowl of water and paper. Pages lapped the curbs, curled around tires, plastered themselves to benches and shoes and the statue's pedestal. People stood at the edges, not stepping in, as if afraid the words might stain. Clara opened her door and waded in. The first sheet she lifted off the water was a patient roster. Harris County Sanatorium, admittance log, names, diagnoses. On the back in smaller handwriting, transfer codes that matched the old chamber numbers. Miles knelt beside her, pulled free a strip of ledger with credit stamped in the same tidy, monstrous font as the duplicate book. He didn't speak. He just held it until the rain softened it to a ribbon that wound around his wrist like a regret. Cole arrived with a line of volunteers carrying tarps to lay across the square as makeshift tables. He looked at the floating documents and at Clara, and for once did not try to turn any of it into a prayer. Lay them flat, he said. We'll read them until reading becomes a kind of gait. June moved among the papers with a baker's efficiency, peeling them from the water, pressing them to the tarps, smoothing bubbles with the flat of her palm. The fisherman in the red cap did the same with his big hands, eyes down, mouth set, as if icing a cake for a child who wasn't coming home but still deserved pretty. Ray stood at the border, hat low, not entering the square. He watched the town choose work over panic, and something in his posture untied a knot. Marion found a stack of photographs stuck together by time. She separated them carefully, black and white faces flattening under rain, rooms with numbers on tile, a corridor with a sign that read, Archive with an arrow pointing into water. On the last photo, 2 figures blurred by movement, one in a nurse's uniform, one in a deputy's. Between them, a door half open, darkness beyond. Clara set the duplicate ledger on a dry corner of tarp and flipped to the balance page. The columns looked smaller out here, less certain of their own math. Read, Cole said, hoarse, out loud. So Clara read. She read names from the asylum, dates from the minutes, balances from the ledger. She read the watch rotation notes, W chair by debt, not by merit, and watched shoulders flinch that had thought themselves too strong. She read the symbol key, the little stitched life preserver that meant credit applied. People looked at their hands as if wondering what they had held when they shouldn't. Miles raised his head, rain making a crosshatch in his eyebrows. "My mother believed in boxes," he said. "She believed if you sorted pain, it wouldn't spill. She was wrong. I was wrong for pretending the sorting was a kind of love." From the edge of the square, a voice. "Who was the watcher?" Ray answered without moving. "A chair, a ledger, a promise to carry the weight no one else admits exists." He finally stepped forward through the water. "Sometimes me, sometimes men who hired me, sometimes men I hated while they used my lists." "And women?" June asked quietly. Ray lifted his chin toward the church. "Women kept the minutes because the men told them they were tidy." He swallowed. They were tidy. That was the problem. The rain eased again, not stopping, just resting. For a moment, the square held a fragile, workable balance. The town, the papers, the storm, the names. Then the lake made another decision. A low surge rolled down Main, not high, but strong enough to lift what hadn't yet been lifted. The tarps bucked, pages slid. A small panicked sound moved through the crowd. Clara grabbed the duplicate ledger, hugged it to her chest. A page from the asylum log tore free and spun toward the statue pedestal. It hit the bronze and stuck there, dead center under the founder's pointing hand. She waited, peeled it back, and saw Emily's handwriting layered over the printed lines, a palimpsest the lake had made legible when salt and iron kissed. "If you are reading this, then the chair is listening. Read him to sleep." Clara turned in a slow circle, ledger in arms. Voice finding a new register designed for more than oxygen. She raised the book high and let the square hear the sentence that turns a crime mystery into a verdict. "The watcher has no face," she said, "but he has a bedtime." A laugh broke out, thin, shocked, then spreading. Relief, edged with rage. People needed a line that could carry both. Ray's eyes closed for a heartbeat, and when he opened them, his shoulders had made a choice. "Finish it," he said to Clara. "You started this read aloud. You end it." She nodded, turned the final page, and saw one last entry penciled in smaller, newer hand, as if written while running. "If you say all the names and burn the ledger, debt resets to the living." "Fire?" Cole asked at her shoulder. "In the rain?" Miles said. Marion shook the rain from her hair and smiled a tired, feral smile. "Salt," she said, "and a dry corner." June lifted her chin toward the diner. "I've got sterno, foil, and a sheet pan." "Go," Clara said. June ran. The square held its breath, and the lake, for the first time since noon, seemed to listen instead of speak. Somewhere behind the church, thunder muttered like an old man grateful for a chair. June came back running through the puddles, a metal sheet pan held above her head like a strange crown. Sterno cans rattled in the tray, each one clinking a small, urgent rhythm. "Kitchen was half flooded," she said, "but the matches stayed dry." Marion cleared space on the tarp table, sweeping stray pages aside. Cole fetched a glass bowl from the church kitchen and filled it with lake water, ritual by convenience. Clara laid the duplicate ledger across the foil, open to the first page, and looked at Miles. "Ready?" she asked. He nodded. "For once." She struck a match. The flame trembled, thin as a whisper, but when she held it to the edge of the paper, the ink answered. Blue turned black. Black turned orange, and a single curl of smoke rose, sweet with mildew and guilt. The crowd pressed closer. Faces glowed in the fire's reflection, ordinary faces caught between fear and relief. Every flick of flame erased a line of handwriting. Every pop of moisture released another sigh from the town's long-sealed throat. Marion murmured, "Read him to sleep." So Clara did. She read the last lines aloud while the fire chewed forward. Balance reset. Debt returned to living hands. The watcher sleeps where no name fits the ledger. The words crumbled into ash that glowed, then drifted upward in small orange questions. The lake caught the sparks, hissed once, and went quiet. No roar, no protest, just a long exhale that sounded almost like peace. For the first time, the air smelled clean. Cole crossed himself. Miles closed his eyes. June blew on the coals until only a gray hush remained. Then the siren stopped. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of rain easing, of people breathing, of the low settling sound a building makes when it decides not to fall. Someone in the crowd began to hum, an old hymn, off-key but brave. Others joined. No one led. No one followed. It was less music than a declaration that the night hadn't won. Clara set the pan down in the shallow water at her feet. Ash spread out in pale fans that the current took gently toward the lake. Each ripple carried a different story, a different name. Miles stepped beside her. "So what now?" he asked. She watched the ash drift until it disappeared. "Now the town writes its own minutes," she said. "No chair, no watcher, just witnesses." Marion laughed under her breath. "Witnesses get bored." "Then maybe boredom will save us," Clara said. Ray stood a few yards away, hat gone, rain streaking the lines of his face. When she looked at him, he didn't look away. He lifted his hand in a half salute, acknowledgement, apology, surrender, all in one tired motion. Then he turned and walked down the flooded street toward the dam, where the mist was already folding over the catwalk like a curtain call. The statue's bronze hand no longer pointed accusingly at the lake. Sometime during the surge, its arm had twisted just enough that it now aimed at the town instead. "Poetic," Marion said. "Predictable," Clara replied, but she smiled, a small, human, exhausted smile. Cole came forward, wiping his glasses on a drenched sleeve. "The congregation will expect a sermon." "You already gave it," Clara said. "You just called it a fire." He nodded. "Then may the smoke count as prayer." They began to disperse, families back to homes, volunteers checking streets, floodlights humming to life on portable rigs. No one shouted. No one tried to decide what came next. Havenridge, for once, was content to simply exist. As dawn broke, the clouds peeled back in thin bands of violet and gold. Steam rose from the soaked asphalt, ghostly and forgiving. The lake lay calm, surface glassy, except where the current still tugged the ashes toward its center. Clara stood at the waterline, Marion beside her, both wrapped in emergency blankets that smelled faintly of plastic and new beginnings. Marion said, "Think it's really over?" Clara shook her head. "Stories like this don't end. They just stop telling themselves." She looked down at the lake's reflection, two women small against the brightening sky. For a second, beneath their mirrored faces, something glimmered. Faint script, maybe. Or maybe just the light playing tricks. The letters rearranged themselves into a final sentence she couldn't quite read, then faded. She whispered anyway. "Rest." The water answered with a ripple, then stilled. Miles called from the road, clipboard in hand, hair plastered flat. "County crews are coming. Reporters, too." Clara turned, shading her eyes from the new sun. "Then let them record what they see," she said. "No edits." He smiled. "You'll hate the headlines." "I'll write better ones," she said. June pulled up in her battered Chevy, window down, offering coffee in paper cups. "Caffeine before collapse?" she asked. Clara took a cup, hands trembling from warmth this time, not fear. The first sip tasted like earth and relief. "Dark roast," June said. "Figured you'd prefer it." "Dark's fine," Clara said, "and we've earned it." They stood together for a while. Sheriff, pastor, waitress, witness, watching the lake catch the first true light of morning. In the distance, a single gull screamed once and circled away. The waterline had dropped an inch, maybe two, enough to show the broken top of the old asylum's gate. On it, faint but readable, the number 17 gleamed in rust and sunrise. Marion whispered, "Proof." "Memory," Clara corrected. She turned toward the town, where smoke still drifted from the last of the burned pages. The air smelled of rain and endings. Behind her, the lake exhaled. Somewhere deep below, where concrete met mud, a final bubble rose, soft, deliberate, like a thank you. Clara didn't look back. She walked toward Main Street, coffee in hand, every step a new line in a story no one would file under tragedy again. The lake is quiet now, but silence never means peace in Havenridge. Some stories end when the last page burns, and some just wait for the next voice to read them aloud. What would you do if the truth you buried started whispering your name? You've been listening to DarkPulse, midnight crime stories for sleep, where every crime mystery hides a psychological thriller, and every whisper carries a dark secret. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from tonight, and which truth do you want us to uncover next? Don't forget to like, share, and follow DarkPulse for more true crime stories, thrillers for sleep, and unsolved mysteries that don't just end. They echo until the next night. Stay awake. Stay curious. Because in the world of DarkPulse, nothing ever stays buried.